Chapter 481. As soon as Qin Yining spoke, Lu Heng, who was beside her, furrowed his brows in worry. He couldn't help but tug on her sleeve. He could also tell that Si Qin was a bit off, but this was Taiden's national affairs. There was no need for an outsider to speak up, especially in front of Si Qin. Lu Heng was a bit annoyed at Qin Yining's impulsiveness, but he was more worried that she would be implicated. As expected, Si Qin stood up and walked in front of Inari. He looked at Qin Yining with a cold gaze. Qin Yining's words were not impulsive, but after careful consideration. If the Taiden rulers were united, what good would it do for Dezhou? It would be best if Inari and Si Qin were suspicious of each other, so that they would have no time to invade. Furthermore, she could tell that Si Qin was a man who placed great importance on power. If Inari continued to act foolishly, the throne would be usurped sooner or later. If Si Qin became the Taiden's ruler, the pace of their invasion to the south would increase. However, Dezhou's treasury was currently empty. How would they have the strength to resist? Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu were having a hard time leading their troops into battle. How many soldiers would be spilled on the battlefield? How many innocent people would die? Qin Yining didn't want to see a war. It would be best if Inari and Si Qin were busy fighting each other. Qin Yining looked fearlessly at Si Qin and smiled. Does Prince Consort also think that my words are reasonable? It seems that Prince Zhongshuan's consort is quite knowledgeable. Isn't there a saying in Dezhou that a woman's virtue is if she has no talent? If the consort is like this, wouldn't she be considered a deviant? Hearing Si Qin's words, Inari added, look at that vixen. She's definitely not someone who knows her place. When Qin Yining saw Inari's expression, she knew that her warning was in vain. When she met Inari's angry and jealous eyes, she shook her head and sighed. Khan, you should pay attention to your own status when you speak. Only then did Inari remember that he was on the street. She was the Khan of the Tatar Empire, and so many people were watching her every move. Such a statement of jealousy would really attract criticism. Inari turned around and said, let's go back to the palace. The accompanying guards immediately complied and ordered them to set off. The group moved forward again, heading towards the palace. The commoners dispersed and regained their previous enthusiasm. Qin Yining returned to the handcart. Lu Heng said in a low voice, I know what you're thinking, but you have to think about your own safety. It's best if you stay alive and return to Dezhou. You don't want to lose your life here for no reason, right? Qin Yining knew that Lu Heng was truly concerned about her. She said in a low voice, I know. Si Qin still wants to use me. He won't kill me for now. I feel like he's up to something. You have to be careful. Even though you're from the Lu family, you've been missing for so long. You still don't know what's going on in your family. You have to think about taking a step back when you're negotiating with them. Don't trust your family too much. Qin Yining was a person who knew how to repay kindness. Now that she and Lu Heng were in trouble together, Lu Heng was truly concerned about her. She also sincerely reminded Lu Heng. Even though it was a splash of cold water, Lu Heng still felt warm from her sincere concern. How could he not understand? The Lu family was a century-old family. Its power was intertwined and not united. He had been away for so long, and now that he was missing, the power in his family might have already been reshuffled. Even though Si Qin didn't kill him because of his status as a member of the Lu family, he still kept him alive for negotiation. However, if the Lu family had any intention of giving up on him, Si Qin definitely wouldn't let him go. Speaking of which, the two of them were in the same situation. The architecture of the Taiden Imperial Palace was completely different from that of Dezhou's Imperial Palace. The palaces here were less exquisite and more magnificent. The palace maids all bowed in unison to welcome the Khan. Anari had been suppressing his anger. Now that they were in his territory, he immediately pointed at Chin Ening and said, "Lock her up in the dungeon for Ben Khan. Arrange for people to keep an eye on her. Without my orders, no one is allowed to let her out." "Yes." The Imperial Guards immediately came forward to tie her up. However, Si Chin raised his hand to stop them. "Khan, we still need to make use of these two people. The dungeon is dark and damp. If a woman gets sick or something happens to her, it will affect our plans." Anari narrowed his eyes at Si Chin. He approached him and grabbed his collar. He gritted his teeth and said, "You can't bear to part with her." Along the way, Si Chin had already been fed up with Anari's forceful attitude. Now that she was being so unreasonable, Si Chin was even angrier. He suppressed his anger and said, "Khan, please don't speak in such an eccentric manner. We are husband and wife, not enemies. Could it be that you haven't seen or heard how I treated you all these years? I am very clear that you care about me, and I am very touched. However, you have wronged me time and time again, and it makes me very sad." Si Chin was born gentle and refined. He had the temperament of a scholarly general. At this time, he was frowning and standing with his hands behind his back. He had an imposing manner that made people trust him. Anari had long been deeply in love with him. The two of them had supported each other until now. She admired and worshipped this man. Hearing him say this, Anari's heart skipped a beat. Thinking back to her actions, she felt somewhat regretful. However, her pride as a Khan did not allow her to lower her head. She stubbornly bit her lips and did not speak. Si Chin sighed and turned to instruct the palace maids, "Take the two guests to the side hall to rest. Arrange for people to take care of them." "Yes." The palace maids obeyed and led Chin Ening and Lu Heng in opposite directions. Chin Ening glanced at the two older maids leading her. Seeing their light steps and well-trained appearance, she knew that they were skilled in martial arts. Regardless of how Si Chin comforted Anari, Chin Ening followed behind the maids. She carefully observed the courtyards on both sides of the corridor and the tall and rugged buildings. She also memorized the surrounding scenery and routes clearly. The side hall where she was locked up was very spacious. As soon as she entered, she felt a gust of cold air hit her in the face. The floor of the hall was neatly laid with stone bricks. The stone bricks were covered with a red carpet. The windows on both sides were tightly shut. Behind the screen was a wide couch. In front of the couch was a square stove sunk into the ground. The bonfire inside was not lit. "Madam, please rest here for the time being." The maid de show spoke very well. Her voice echoed in the spacious side hall. Chin Ening nodded. Another maid went forward to light the bonfire. Chin Ening sat down on the couch and stretched out her hands towards the bonfire to warm herself. At this time, several maids brought in a quilt and a fur mattress. Chin Ening did not refuse. She wrapped herself in the quilt and buried half of her face in it. She let out a long sigh as she warmed herself by the fire. Tayton was even more northerly than Dezhou's capital. In this season, the capital of Dian was already in the season of autumn rain and cold. Here, one could already feel the knife-like northern wind. Chin Ening shivered. After warming up for a while, she curled up and lay down to rest. Chapter 482. Hunt. Chin Ening knew that this was definitely not a simple matter. Anime was full of jealousy, and he looked like he had fallen into a vinegar jar just now. Sichin obviously wanted to use Anime to do something. They were quarreling happily just now, and now they suddenly said that they wanted to hunt. There must be a conspiracy behind it. The maid saw Chin Ening's eyelashes fluttering, her eyes lowered in silence. Half of her small face was hidden in the soft animal skin, and the other half was hidden in the warm orange firelight. Even a woman's heart softened when she saw her beautiful appearance, let alone a man. Qin Yining's behavior of being so wary of Henri and hating Qin Yining was more understandable. "Madam." The maid called out inquisitively. She obeyed Inari's orders, and still had to report back. Qin Yining wanted to refuse. Her body was weak, and she was tired from the long journey. She was already at her limit. If she was still in the palace, Qin Yining would definitely relax and have a good rest. She would just laze around in bed eating, sleeping, and recuperating. She might even fall sick. But now she was only a prisoner, and did not have the right to indulge herself. She also did not have the right to refuse or resist Inari's orders. It had to be said that the desperate situation forced her to be strong. In the current situation, she could only grit her teeth and continue to struggle. Otherwise, she could only stretch out her neck and become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. "I understand. Go back and tell Khan that I will be there." Seeing Qin Yining agree, the maid nodded. She took a few steps back, walked around the screen, and left the side hall. As the hall door closed with a creak, the entire hall fell into silence again. Only the crackling of the firewood could be heard from the bonfire. Qin Yining did not relax. Because she could feel that although there was no one in the hall, there were at least 2 people secretly watching her every move. Moreover, they were watching from different directions. Thinking about it, it should be 2 groups of people. Because it was a woman without the strength to truss up a chicken, there was no need to send 2 experts. Moreover, there were layers of guards outside the hall, so there was no need to be afraid that she would try to escape. Qin Yining tightened the blanket around his body and wrapped himself into a ball. Then, he curled up next to the bonfire and lay down. At this moment, she missed her home in the capital very much. She missed Pang Shao, her parents, the Ma clan and the Yao clan. There was also Bing Tang and Ji Yun. He did not know if they had escaped. He didn't know if Chao Yuqing could still survive after suffering such heavy injuries. She had been separated from Pang Shao for more than 3 months. If Pang Shao knew that she was missing, he would be extremely worried. Qin Yining closed her eyes. However, she felt that her nose was sour and her eyes were hot. Tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. She used all her strength to restrain herself from crying. Tears made people weak, but she could not be weak now. She wanted to escape from Si Qin's scheme and Inari's fear to leave the Titan alive. She could not allow herself to be weak at all. She could not allow herself to be afraid or retreat. Once she had such weak emotions, only eternal damnation would await her. Qin Yining did not sleep well that night. She was imprisoned and monitored in a place that did not provide her with any sense of security. She had to constantly be on guard to see if anyone came back. It was impossible for her to sleep peacefully. However, when she woke up early the next morning, she was still energetic and calm as usual. The maid was the same one from yesterday. Her name was Wu Yahan. Qin Yining observed that she might also be a martial artist. Because she walked silently, she always appeared behind him suddenly. However, Wu Yahan's temper was not annoying. As long as it was within her knowledge, she would bring Qin Yining around. She would also explain to her about the surrounding buildings and some Titan customs. She was also attentive when serving Qin Yining. "Madam, it's almost time." "Okay." Qin Yining took the cotton cloak from Wu Yahan and put it on. She also put on a gray rabbit fur scarf and warm boots. Wu Yahan led Qin Yining out of the palace. Outside the side door of the palace, there was already a group of guards and warriors waiting there. The guards were all wearing animal skins and had longbows in their arms. Their quivers were full of arrows and were ready to shoot. The slaves who were leading the horses and preparing the carriages were all dressed in rags. Their hair was messy and their faces were miserable. Among the slaves, there were even 7 or 8-year-old children and shriveled old men. Qin Yining frowned and followed behind Wu Yahan. Wu Yahan pointed to a group of slaves and said, "Madam, the Khan ordered you to wait here." Qin Yining understood that this was a Nari's humiliation to her. However, she was originally a prisoner. Moreover, she had never felt that she was any nobler than a slave. She was born as a human. How could she be born as a lowly person? Moreover, with a Nari's methods, these slaves could be ordinary herdsmen who were defeated by her tribes during her expeditions. She did not think much of it and turned to stand in the middle of the group of slaves. The slaves stood at the side with their heads down and slightly bowed. They did not dare to raise their heads to see who was standing in their group. Qin Yining's calm performance made Wu Yahan have a whole new level of respect for her. Not long after, Lu Heng, who was wearing a gray rat cloak, arrived with a Nari and Si Qin. As soon as he stepped out of the arched brick city gate, he saw Qin Yining standing in the middle of a group of dirty slaves. She was like a crane in a flock of chickens, happy and content. Lu Heng immediately frowned and said in a low voice, "General Si Qin, the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine has a noble status. Even if she is a prisoner like me, she should still be treated with respect. How can you treat her like a slave?" Si Qin was very pleased with this title. He seriously followed Lu Heng's gaze and saw Qin Yining standing in the middle of the slaves. He could not help but disagree and said, "This is my negligence." He waved his hand and ordered Wu Yahan, "Why haven't you invited the concubine over?" "You are not allowed." Anari was already unhappy when she saw Lu Heng pleading for Qin Yining. When she saw Si Qin agree, she angrily stopped him. It was Ben Khan who ordered her to stand there. A lowly slave should stand there. Lu Heng raised his eyebrows and looked at Anari strangely. "Is it because my Taitan language is not good enough? A concubine with a different surname can only be called a lowly slave in the Taitan. Then how many lowly slaves are there in the Taitan royal family?" "You!" Anari angrily glared at Lu Heng. "Don't forget, you are also a prisoner. If Ben Khan wants to kill you, it's just a matter of moving his mouth." "You!" "So it's like this. Last night General Si Qin said that I was a friend of the Taitan and that it was natural for friends to help each other. Today, I have become a prisoner in the Khan's mouth. Then should I go stand with the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine now?" Lu Heng came from an extraordinary background and had a noble temperament. He was more like a servant than a Nari. Coupled with the displeasure on his handsome face, it made Anari even angrier. Anari angrily raised her whip and was about to lash out. Si Qin reached out and grabbed the whip in time. He held Anari's hand in his and said, "Khan, please calm down." Anari looked at Si Qin in disbelief. "You're doing this for that lowly woman again." Si Qin's face was as cold as water. "Khan, you have to be careful of what you say. What are you trying to do with me by suspecting me like this?" Anari saw that Si Qin was really angry. She felt wronged and angry. Moreover, there were so many servants looking at them. This made her lose face even more. She really wanted to explode. She wanted to explain what happened last night, but seeing Si Qin's angry expression, she remembered the wet nurse's words, "Khan, you must not be so suspicious. The prince consort is not that kind of person. If Khan continues to be suspicious, it will only make a man's heart more inclined towards a gentle and affectionate woman." Gentle and affectionate. Anari couldn't help but look at the hateful Qin Yining who was still standing among the slaves with a calm and beautiful expression. She forced herself to control her temper. Today's hunt must kill her. What cooperation? What business deal? As long as she could cooperate with the Lu family, that woman deserved to die. Seeing that Inari was silent, Si Chin's anger subsided. He angrily reprimanded Wu Yahan. How did you lead the way? How could you lead the mistress to the slaves' area? Wu Yahan had been following Inari's orders and felt wronged. But she also knew that at this time, her master could only push the blame to her in order to regain face. She knelt down and kowtowed. It was this slave's negligence. Please punish me, Prince Consort. Go and plead with the mistress. If she is unwilling to forgive you, I have nothing to say. Si Chin's words were de Zhou's. He looked at Qin Yining. These people had been arguing for so long. Qin Yining didn't understand at all, but looking at their eyes, Qin Yining could guess that they were arguing for her. They were most likely arguing about her standing with the slaves. She didn't expect that Lu Heng would stand up for her. Although she didn't know what he said, seeing Inari's face turn green with anger made her feel much better. She was also very grateful to Lu Heng. Now that she heard Si Chin's words, Qin Yining understood everything. She felt that Si Chin's thoughts were funny. If she really punished Wu Yahan, not to mention how fierce Anna's revenge would be in the future, wouldn't it be better to change another maidservant? What's more, Wu Yahan was following orders. She had always taken good care of her. Qin Yining immediately waved her hand and said, "Get up. You were just following orders." She was speaking de Zhou's language, so the slaves around her didn't understand. But Wu Yahan's de Zhou's language was very good. Hearing Qin Yining's words, although she was afraid that Inari would be angry, she was very grateful. She put one hand on her chest and bowed before standing up. The slaves could understand Taitan's language, but they couldn't understand what Qin Yining was saying. They understood the argument between the Khan, Prince Consort, and Lu Heng. Now that Qin Yining was so tolerant, their impression of her became better. These slaves were the former nobles of the defeated tribes. They had been enslaved by Inari for a long time. They also sympathized with Qin Yining's current situation. What's more, this was a woman who looked like a fairy. Even if she was the princess consort of de Zhou's god of war, Wang Yi, it couldn't change their impression of her. Qin Yining was invited to Lu Heng's side. Inari suppressed the anger in her heart and ordered someone to give Qin Yining a horse and a bow. She couldn't wait and shouted, "Let's go." Chapter 483. Qin Yining's horse was a tall yellow horse with a quiver on its saddle. There were 30 arrows in it, and her bow was the same half-stone bow that Inari used. Hunting was not a problem for Qin Yining. In her early years, she relied on hunting to survive in the mountains. At first, she would set traps to catch small animals, and identify herbs and wild vegetables. When she was older, she would go to the market at the foot of the mountain to sell some mushrooms and herbs in exchange for some money. She knew that there were people who bought furs, so she followed some hunters and learned some hunting skills and common knowledge. Although she lived a carefree life for 3 years, she would not forget the skills she learned. However, shooting arrows while riding a horse was difficult. If she stood on the ground, it would be much easier. However, Qin Yining did not want to overdo it. Her existence had already caused Inari to fall into a vat of vinegar. If she showed her talent in hunting, Inari would probably be angered to death. She only held the bow for self-protection. Obviously, Lu Heng had the same thoughts as her. He also held the bow and reins with one hand as he followed Qin Yining. Outside of the capital, there was a vast and boundless grassland. In the October weather, the grass was yellow and there was frost on it. Occasionally, there would be patches of neat but sparse pine trees. The sky was full of clouds, forming a faint fog on the mountains in the distance. Even breathing seemed to be particularly humid. The group of people ran for half an hour and arrived at the foot of a large mountain. Most of the trees on the mountain were pine and cypress trees unique to the cold north. Compared to the sparse trees on the way here, the trees here were particularly tall. Anari waved her hand and everyone stopped. We will hunt here. Let's see who has the most game. Yes. Everyone, including the guards who rode their horses here, as well as the slaves who had been driven all the way here, all followed Anami into the woods, and scattered into several groups, walking on tiptoe. Qin Yining and Lu Heng spontaneously walked beside Si Qin. When Anari saw that Qin Yining was shamelessly clinging on to Si Qin, he was so angry that his face turned red. He was not in a hurry to hunt his prey, so he turned around and followed beside Si Qin. Qin Yining quietly observed the surrounding terrain and did not make a move. Anari, on the other hand, was showing off his skills. Sometimes he would kill a pheasant, and sometimes he would chase after a hare. After traveling through the pine forest for a while, Anari felt bored. We're not lucky today. We only got these. Why don't we ride outside? Si Qin originally wanted to make Anari happy, so naturally she could say whatever she wanted. She whistled and called for everyone to leave the pine forest and return to where the slaves were guarding the horses. Everyone returned to their horses and began to search the grassland again. After going around a gentle slope, they saw a herd of wild gazelles. Anari was interested and urged her horse to charge forward. The gazelles looked up in shock and ran away when they saw the people coming. Anari liked the feeling of being chased like this. She led her men and chased after them, shouting. Who knew that when the group of people chased over a slope, the herd of gazelles that were running in front suddenly panicked and ran away in all directions? It's a pack of wolves. Khan, it's a pack of wolves. The men shouted loudly. Anari excitedly said, it just so happens that Ben Khan thinks that hunting gazelles is boring. Let's catch a few wolves to play with. Anari thought for a while and suddenly had an idea. She stopped her horse and stood on a high ground to look at the fleeing gazelles. She smiled at Qin Yining and said, Ben Khan has heard that Dezhou's Prince Zhongshuan is very brave. He is Dezhou's god of war, Wang Yi. Even Wang Fei is a heroine and a rare talent. Wang Fei must have learned a lot from Prince Zhongshuan. Go down and show us your skills. As soon as she said this, Lu Heng was shocked and his expression changed. Before Qin Yining could speak, he stood in front of her and said in a low voice, Khan, please take back your order. Our Dezhou is different from your country's customs. Women don't pay attention to learning how to ride and shoot. Wang Fei is a lady from a noble family. How can she fight against wolves? Not to mention Wang Fei, even the men of your country may not be able to fight against a pack of wolves. With Khan's order, it's hard to avoid suspicion of murder. Anari was trying to murder. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that. But she wanted to do it. This was Taden land and she was the ruler of this country. That meant that she could do whatever she wanted. If she wanted someone to live, they would live. If she wanted someone to die, they would die. Seeing Lu Heng so nervous that he jumped out to help Qin Yining, Anari was unhappy. She sneered and said, it's you again. Surnamed Lu, what's your relationship with Prince Zhongshuan's consort? Why are you always interrupting her every time something happens? At this point, Anari deliberately raised her voice and said in a surprised tone, don't tell me that you two are in that kind of relationship. Surnamed Qin, you're really shameless. You dare to flirt with another man in front of everyone. Even if you don't care about your face, your husband does. Qin Yining clenched the bow in her hand tightly. Her fists and knuckles turned white. Anari had repeatedly slandered and provoked her. She really couldn't stand it anymore. Qin Yining suddenly drew 2 arrows. She took 2 steps forward and took aim. She pulled the half-stone bow into a full moon shape. At the bottom of the hill, the yellow sheep were scattered by the wolves. The wild wolves were very smart and disciplined. They only killed a few sheep when they were driving them. A very strong adult gray wolf howled a few times, and the rest of the wild wolves cooperated and tried to drive the whole flock of sheep in one direction. Ening pointed the sharp tip of the arrow at the alpha wolf. After she steadied her mind and took aim, she released an arrow with a whoosh. The wolf was very sensitive. It immediately sensed the danger and tried to dodge. However, Ening's arrow had already arrived and hit its hind leg. The alpha wolf howled and ran 2 steps with a limp. Then, it viciously looked in the direction of the arrow. When it saw Ening knocking the arrow, it immediately bared its fangs and barked a few times. However, the second arrow in Ening's hand had arrived at this time and hit the head wolf again. The ferocious male wolf fell to the ground and blood flowed on the grass. Good! Good archery! Lu Heng and Si Qin cheered at the same time. Even the guards and slaves who came with them couldn't help but look at Ening. They didn't expect that such a delicate beauty could take down the alpha wolf with 2 arrows. Anari was so angry that her face turned red. She only wanted Ening to lose her life and feed the wolves. She wanted her to go down and fight the wolves alone, but who knew that she would be so cunning? Ening smiled and said, "The alpha wolf is injured. Please let them open a gap and let the rest of the wolves leave." "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to command Ben Khan? Ben Khan must kill these wolves. Not a single one can be left alive." "You!" Anari gritted her teeth and pointed at the group of slaves behind her. Then, she coldly pointed at the wolves and said, "Go, capture all the wolves for Ben Khan." When Ening heard this, she was so angry that her eyebrows were raised. She rebuked, "What does Khan think his subjects are? Livestock that you can order around as you please. Look at these people. There are old and weak people, women and children. How can you be so cruel as to let them capture the wolves alive? You are sending them to their deaths." Anari was furious. She glared at Ening and waved her hand at the guards and attendants beside her. These people immediately understood and rushed into the group of slaves with horsewhips. They drove the group of people towards the wolves. A few people who refused to go obediently were killed on the spot. The screams of the slaves were filled with despair. They could only follow the orders of the guards and rush down with their eyes closed. It was as if they wanted to end this miserable and hopeless life. In the pack of wolves that had lost their leader, another wolf had taken the place of the previous one. They seemed to be anxious to avenge their leader. Seeing so many people rushing over, they were not afraid at all. Chapter 484. Anari was so angry that he laughed. Tayton said quickly, "Young Master Lu, you wouldn't think that you have the right to be arrogant in front of Ben Khan just because you discussed some things with the prince consort, would you?" Lu Heng let go of the whip, but tightly protected Ening behind him. He said in a deep voice, "Khan, you don't have to think too much. I just want to remind you that the people being eaten by the wolves are your Tayton people, and the people watching from the side are also your Tayton people. If you let your people see such a tyrannical side of you, aren't you afraid that they will grieve and hurt their own kind? Aren't you afraid that your benevolent reputation will be ruined, and that no one will be willing to follow you sincerely in the future?" Anari said in a deep voice, "Do you think it's your turn to teach Ben Khan how to do things? I don't dare. I don't mean to teach you, I just want to advise Khan. After all, the prince consort and I have reached an agreement to cooperate, so we can be considered friends. Khan and the prince consort are husband and wife, so we are family. If I pretend not to see the problems in my friend's family, then what kind of person am I? You're twisting words and forcing logic." Anari pointed at Ening and sneered, "You obviously like this vixen and want to please her. Lu Heng, if you're really a man, then don't use this kind of method. If you like her, then you like her. If you want to sleep with her, then sleep with her. Anyway, there are so many opportunities outside, what are you afraid of? The matter between you and her is your matter. Can you not always get involved between me and her? Lu Heng's feelings of not getting what he wanted were poked, and he was said to be so unbearable. He was so angry that his face turned red. He said in a deep voice, "If Khan doesn't want to listen to my advice, then I have nothing to say. But Khan has done so many unrighteous things, don't regret it in the future. Who do you think you are? Do you think that Ben Khan will listen to you?" Inari kept talking in a language that Qin Yining couldn't understand. When he argued with Lu Heng, he also spoke in Taitan. Qin Yining didn't know what they were arguing about. He was really depressed and aggrieved. Especially when a group of slaves were being slaughtered by wild wolves not far from the foot of the hill. The stench of blood was so thick that it couldn't disperse, and the screams were so sharp that they cut a few holes in people's hearts. This kind of hell on earth was caused by a single sentence from Inari, but Inari did not have the slightest awareness of this, as if it was a matter of course. What's the use of these people who monopolize power and don't think about the people? What's the difference between a Nari and a Dayan ruler? Qin Yining circled around the two people who were arguing. Once again, he knocked an arrow on his bow and aimed at the wild wolf in the middle of the battle. At first, she was able to aim accurately because there were no humans around the wolf. But now, the wolf was killing in the crowd. Qin Yining's arrow tip turned sharply, and it was very easy for her to accidentally injure her own kind. This made her fearful and fearful. Seeing that she kept aiming but didn't shoot an arrow, Si Qin finally opened his mouth. "You want to kill the wolf again? Are you sure that you won't hurt the people around you?" Qin Yining looked back at Si Qin and sneered. At this time, shouldn't the prince consort think of a way to persuade the Khan to let those slaves go? Si Qin clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Do you know that these people are all criminals who have been convicted of treason? If their deaths can bring joy to the Khan, then it's a worthy death." Qin Yining's bow was fully drawn, but she couldn't aim at the prey. She couldn't rashly release the bowstring in case she hurt her arm. Just as she was feeling melancholy, she heard Si Qin's words. She was so angry that her long, shapely eyebrows rose. She turned around and aimed the sharp tip of the arrow directly at Si Qin's nose. Si Qin looked at Qin Yining without moving an inch. Inari and Lu Heng were both frightened by Qin Yining's actions. They even forgot about their quarrel. The surrounding guards drew their swords and sabers. They surrounded Qin Yining one by one, as if they would only stop when they cut her into 1,000 pieces. Si Qin didn't show any fear. His eyes were even brighter, and there was even an unconcealable smile on his lips. "What do you want to do?" Qin Yining pursed her lips. A gust of wind blew, bringing along a fishy smell. It also blew the hair on her temples and the red agate fringe on her forehead. "Give the order to save people and kill the wolf. Otherwise, I will kill you. I give the order. Khan's decree is for them to die. What order can I give? Isn't there a saying in Dezhou that goes, if the monarch wants his subjects to die, they have no choice but to die? You are the Taitan god of war. You control a large number of troops and have such high prestige in the army. Do you think these people won't listen to you? You just don't care about their lives. My husband is a soldier who leads troops to war. He is as famous as you. I know that his hands are stained with a lot of blood, and he has killed countless people. But I know in my heart that he is a good person who can subdue demons and has a compassionate heart. But what about you? Your compassionate heart has been eaten by dogs, hasn't it? Such an unprincipled person. How can you be as famous as my husband? I feel ashamed for you. Shut up. Qin Yining's words pierced through people's hearts. Si Qin listened with a gloomy expression, while Anari was seething with anger. Guards, take her down for Ben Khan. When the guards heard this, they rushed forward like a swarm of bees. Lu Heng anxiously stomped his feet and stepped forward to protect Qin Yining. He pulled her back and said, "How can you be so impulsive? Quickly move the arrow away." Qin Yining looked back at the few remaining slaves at the bottom of the hill. She gritted her teeth and showed no signs of compromising. The guard stepped forward and grabbed Qin Yining's hand that was holding onto the arrow's tail, forcing her to release the arrow in a direction where there was no one around. When the bowstring was released, Qin Yining's hands were immediately pinned behind her back. Anari said in a low voice, "This person intends to assassinate the prince consort. Her intentions should be punished. Immediately take her away and behead her." "Yes." The guards pulled Qin Yining to the side. Unexpectedly, Si Qin, who had been silent all this time, coughed and casually waved her hand. When the guards saw this, they immediately forgot about Anari's orders and let go of Qin Yining's hands. When Qin Yining saw this, she immediately understood that in Tayton, Si Qin really meant what she said. Anari shouted, "Why did you let go of this evil vixen? Ever since she came, we have not been able to live in peace. If we get rid of her today, we can get rid of a scourge." At this moment, a sound similar to a dog's barking came from the bottom of the hill. Qin Yining turned around and saw a ground full of badly mutilated corpses and the grass dyed red with blood. The guards were driving the wild wolves away. She closed her eyes. Ever since she was forced to follow Anari, she had to endure all these frustrations. Every word she said to her was torture. Si Qin gestured again. Immediately, the guards stepped forward and brought Qin Yining and Lu Heng to the side. Chapter 485. Anari was flabbergasted as she looked up at Si Qin, whose face was as calm as still water. She asked in disbelief, "What do you mean?" "Khan." Si Qin squeezed out these two words from between his teeth. He grabbed Anari's wrist and pulled her in front of him. He lowered his head and stared at her until their noses were almost touching. "Have you had enough?" The tassels on Anari's hat were jingling and her wrist was hurting from Si Qin's grip. However, she had no time to think about it. All her thoughts were frozen by Si Qin's unprecedentedly serious expression. "Prince Consort, I am Khan. I have my own rules for everything I do. How dare you say that I am causing trouble?" Si Qin gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "You are the ruler of a country. Your subjects are watching your every word and action. You are acting like a shrew and don't know how to control your emotions in front of others. Do you still care about your face? Do you still care about your face when you act like this? Do you still want me to put my face?" "That's enough. What do you mean by your face? You only care about that vixen and don't care about my feelings at all. Why do you think I am targeting her in front of everyone? If you were truly devoted to me and didn't make me feel the slightest bit of jealousy or sadness, then why would I act like this?" Anari didn't care about her face. Si Qin deliberately lowered his voice so as not to attract the attention of others. However, Anari only cared about making a ruckus. She felt wronged and was suppressing her anger. However, she didn't feel that she was doing anything wrong. Her sharp voice traveled far and wide and attracted everyone's attention. It was as if she wouldn't stop until everyone knew what she was doing. Although Qin Yining didn't understand what they were saying, he couldn't help but frown in disgust when he saw Anari acting like a lunatic. Anari happened to turn her head and met Qin Yining's gaze. Her face burned as if she had been slapped a few times. She was already the Khan and the most respected woman in the Tayton. However, her husband not only used violence against her, but also for another woman. Anari was embarrassed and angry. She struggled to break free from the restraint on her arm and raised her hand to give Si-Chin a hard slap. Paw! With a crisp sound, Si-Chin was slapped to the side. His face was as calm as an ancient well, but all the guards and soldiers around him quieted down in an instant and stared in silence. Anari was actually regretful after the slap. Si-Chin was a heroic man, unlike those despicable people who fawned over her for the sake of power and benefits. When they first got married, it was also Anna who took the initiative. Si-Chin wasn't willing to be the prince consort from the start. After all, any talented and ambitious man would not want to be called a woman who had to be treated with respect. If he became the Khan's son-in-law, he would only be Anari's accessory. Even if he fought for everything with his own efforts, people would say that he achieved it by stepping on a woman's shoulders. Anari knew that Si-Chin had been questioned a lot. In fact, she had been holding back her anger. Because she knew this, she was worried about her gains and losses. That was why she kept a close eye on him and did not let him have the chance to escape. But what did she do now? She slapped this proud man in front of everyone. Anari was very anxious. She anxiously grabbed Si-Chin's hand and said, "I didn't do it on purpose. I was just in a moment of desperation." Before she could finish her words, Si-Chin pushed her hand away. Si-Chin turned and walked away. He raised his voice and ordered everyone, "Go back." With just these two words, the accompanying guards greeted him solemnly. Qin Yining and Lu Heng looked at each other. They could see the deep meaning in each other's eyes. It seemed that they had guessed correctly. In Taitan, Si-Chin's prestige in the military was equivalent to Pang Shao and Ji Ziyu's Tiger Army and Dragon Army in Dezhou. How could such a man be willing to submit to a woman's skirt? Now, it seemed that Anari's bodyguards all respected and submitted to Si-Chin. Anari was actually used to this situation. This meant that Si-Chin had already grasped most of the power in Taitan. He even made people admire him and submit to him. As for Anari, Si-Chin was even more successful. No matter how powerful Anari was outside, as long as Si-Chin was involved, she would immediately become a willful little girl. Whatever she wanted or was afraid of, she would unreservedly show Si-Chin. This made it easy for Si-Chin to control her. For a woman who was addicted to love, this was nothing. However, for a woman who held power, this situation was too dangerous. Qin Yining and Lu Heng followed the guards and found their horses. Anari also pursed her lips and followed with a cold face. On the way back, Lu Heng followed closely beside Qin Yining. He urged his horse closer and whispered, "The situation is dangerous. You have to be more careful from now on. You have to be careful with the food you eat. You also have to be on guard against the people around you. I see that the two of them are in a deadlock. If things go wrong, the Khan will take his anger out on you." Qin Yining nodded and whispered, "You have to be careful too." "I'm fine. I can still work with them, but you're different." At this point, Lu Heng sighed and said, "You also suffered an unexpected calamity." Qin Yining shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Things have already come to this. There is no point in thinking too much. We can only look forward." Lu Heng nodded and stared at her for a moment. He then looked away and muttered, "It is your personality that is precious." "What?" Qin Yining couldn't hear Lu Heng's mutterings clearly due to the sound of galloping horses. She could only vaguely hear what he was saying. Lu Heng suddenly came back to his senses and shook his head, "Nothing." Qin Yining saw this and did not ask any more questions. They went out to hunt but did not catch any prey. The slaves they brought were all fed to the wolves. If Anari had not been so angry that he was about to go crazy, Qin Yining would have mocked Wenwen. Did she go out to hunt or to feed the wolves? The group of people rushed through the city gates. As they were on their way to the palace, they saw two youths appear in the middle of the road again. Everyone hurriedly reined in their horses. Qin Yining looked over. This time, it was broad daylight and he could finally see the two youths clearly. The two youths were born with good facial features. They had thick eyebrows and big eyes. Their clothes were shabby. Although it was cold, they were barefooted like the slaves just now. The two of them knelt on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. They put their foreheads on the ground and said sincerely, "Khan, please let us Abu and enrich out." Anari was originally sulking. She did not expect these two people who did not know what was good for them to come out and block the road. She could not control her temper. She raised her hand and whipped the bigger youth. "Get out of my way." The young man cried out in pain, but he did not dodge. "I beg Khan to let go of me, Abu and Ag. We, Minuo, have long submitted to you. We are your subjects. Why won't you let us go?" Chapter 486. Dead. The youth blinked his eyes in disbelief and shook his head. "No way, my Abu and enrich are both very healthy, they can't be dead. Ben Khan, please be merciful and let them go." Anari sneered, "A bunch of defeated trash. They're all dead. They were useless, they followed Ben Khan to hunt, but they were bitten to death by wolves. Ben Khan had nothing to say to such people. Get out of the way, or I'll throw you to the wolves to accompany your Abu and enrich." Bitten to death by wolves. The two youths' faces were pale and their eyes were dull, they were scared silly. The older one stared blankly at Anari, while the younger one stretched his neck to look at the group. He was clearly trying to find someone, hoping that Anari was joking. More and more Taden people gathered around to watch, they didn't know what was going on. Qin Yining had already understood from Lu Heng's explanation. Looking at the two youths who had lost their parents, Qin Yining felt very sad. Anari was too cruel. In fact, those slaves didn't have to die. Qin Yining wasn't a soft-hearted person. She also understood that all success was built on sacrifices. For example, the establishment of the Dezhou dynasty was built on the bones of many people. If the country was really faced with the destruction of the country and the displacement of the people, there had to be a war. If those slaves were sent to the battlefield, even if they died on the battlefield, it was still admirable. Qin Yining didn't dislike such a heroic way of dying. But today, these slaves didn't die honorably, they simply became Anari's toys. The meaning of their deaths was just to let Anari have some fun for a while. What kind of ruler was this? Anari's absurdity was even worse than the big-eyed fatuous ruler. Just as Qin Yining was cursing in her heart, Qin waved her hand to block Anatri's whip that was about to continue lashing out. She sighed and said, "Your Abu and Ag are indeed dead. After all, the Minuo tribe still has people waiting for you to lead them." The two brothers stared blankly at Qin's compassionate eyes. For a moment, they were overcome with grief and tears rolled down their cheeks. Anari was annoyed and couldn't bear to see the two of them cry. Just as he was about to throw a tantrum, Qin grabbed his wrist tightly. The two had just started arguing, but Qin did not loosen his grip. He looked like he was going to break Anari's hand, which made Anari even angrier. But she didn't want to lose Qin. She had to be patient. She could not continue to embarrass Qin in front of others. Anari allowed Qin to grab his wrist and didn't try to punish the two youths. When she thought about how the remaining 4,000 people of the Minuo tribe were all old, weak, sick, and disabled and had no backbone, and that the entire tribe would have to rely on her as slaves, Anari wasn't in a hurry to kill them. Wouldn't it be better to let them be slaves with her? Anari no longer had any intention to kill them and ordered the people to continue on their journey. The entire group moved forward in a straight line. When they met the two youths, they simply split into two lines and went around them. When Chin Yining passed by the two youths, he saw the tears on their faces and the despair in their eyes. He couldn't help but feel sad. However, his situation wasn't much better than theirs. Chin Yining couldn't help him and she couldn't even protect herself. What she should be worried about now was her life after returning to the palace. With Inari's enmity towards her, Chin Yining believed that if she wasn't careful, she could lose her life. When he returned to the room where she was locked up, Chin Yining found that the guards and maids guarding him had all changed. Inari was really careful. She was a weak woman who didn't know any martial arts and couldn't speak Taitan. How could she escape? Inari didn't even give her a chance to bribe the people around her. However, Chin Yining didn't care at first. He just ate more carefully and used more cautiously when he went out. Chin Yining didn't know what Inari and Si Chin talked about after returning to the palace. When he saw them on the third day, they had already reconciled and seemed to be even closer than before. What surprised Chin Yining the most was not the reconciliation between Inari and Si Chin, but the old friend in front of him. Fairy Lu, also known as Tian Jizi. At this moment, she was wearing a dark blue Daoist robe and was sitting on a mahogany chair opposite him with a smile. Tian Jizi hadn't changed in a long time. Her face was rosy and full of energy, and she seemed to be living a good life. The person standing behind her was also someone familiar. It was Mu Jinghu, who had once protected and saved her. When Chin Yining saw Tian Jizi, he became alert. However, when he saw Mu Jinghu, he knew that although Mu Jinghu was Tian Jizi's martial nephew in name, he was actually Tian Jizi's disciple. The relationship between the master and disciple was naturally not ordinary. However, Chin Yining still had some hope of escaping. If Mu Jinghu was willing to help, she could go back. It had been so long, and Chin Yining was really worried about his family. Tian Jizi spoke naturally in front of Inari and Si Chin. She didn't hesitate to speak to Chin Yining and said, "Miss Family Chin, we meet again. My divination that day was not wrong. You really are a red one star, right?" Chin Yining blushed at her words. If he was thin-skinned, he wouldn't even know how to respond. Long time no see. Fairy Lu is still so energetic. I didn't expect to see you here. Hi, I'm used to being carefree. Naturally, I'll go wherever it's easy to live. Tian Jizi smiled and said, with the Khan and Prince Consort's care, I'm living much more comfortably in Taitan than in Dian. How is it? How do you feel now that you're a princess? Feel? Chin Yining almost retorted. She was a prisoner. Did he have to tell her about his psychological journey after he was forced to leave Pangshao? Tian Jizi smiled and said, forget it. If you don't want to talk about it, then don't. But you don't have to worry. Your luck is still very good. I think it's because of your husband. You haven't used up all your good luck yet. You should rest well. Looking at you, you're much weaker than you were before you were married. No matter what the other party's motive was, at least this sentence showed genuine concern. They could be considered to have met an old friend in a foreign land, right? The first time she met Tian Jizi, it was her grandmother who took her there. Chin Yining thought of her grandmother's family in the far south. She didn't know how their children were doing. Chin Yining really wanted to go back to Dezhou, but there was nothing she could do. Inari saw that Chin Yining and Tian Jizi were chatting happily and couldn't help but feel jealous. It seems like Tian Jizi is very familiar with her. Chapter 487. Chin Yining felt that Tian Jizi's tone was not right. She did not know if Tian Jizi knew about the discord between her and Inari, but what would Inari think if she said that their fates were similar in front of the Taitan's Khan? Anari was meticulous and was very nervous about Si Qin, so she was very strict with her husband. Qin Yining did not have any feelings for Si Qin and had never been close to her. Anari could guess all kinds of ways that Qin Yining had seduced her husband. What if Tian Jizi was added to the mix? Tian Jizi was very accurate in reading people's fates. Qin Yining frowned and looked at Tian Jizi thoughtfully. She met Mu Jinghu's gaze and Mu Jinghu smiled at her, a little embarrassed. And just as Qin Yining thought, Anami's face was as gloomy as water. She said in a strange tone, "It's not easy to meet someone with a fate similar to this Khan." Ben Khan was born into a noble family and knew what he was going to do in the future since he was young. I wonder if the Prince Zhongshuan's wife is the same. Qin Yining gave her a happy smile and said, "Of course I can't compare to the Khan. How many fates can there be in this world?" Tian Jizi looked at Qin Yining with a smile, then looked at Anna and said with an obvious intention to examine her, "This poor Taoist won't make a mistake." Both of them had the same fate. Although they had their ups and downs in their youth, they had accumulated a lot of experience and were extremely precious. Moreover, both of them were destined to marry iron-blooded men who were quite talented in political and military affairs. Anari's eyes flashed and looked at Si Qin beside her. She had a few more guesses. Tian Jizi said so. Did it mean that Qin Yining could develop a relationship with Si Qin? She had always been worried about this. Anari knew that she could not compare to Qin Yining in terms of looks. She also knew that men loved beautiful women. Ever since Si Qin appeared in front of her with Qin Yining, Si Qin had not been as gentle to her as before. They had grown up together, but it seemed that she was not as important to Si Qin as Qin Yining. She originally thought that Si Qin had taken a fancy to Qin Yining's looks. But now that she thought about it, it was more likely that it was because they had similar fates. What if Qin Yining wanted to snatch her husband and then snatched her status? When Anna rethought of this, she was so shocked that she broke out in a cold sweat. She looked into Tian Jizi's eyes, which seemed to know everything. Then she saw the compassion hidden in Tian Jizi's eyes. Anari's pupils shrank and she became more and more worried and afraid. No, she could not sit and wait. She could not let Qin Yining take everything away from her. Qin Yining looked at Anari's face and knew that she had completely misunderstood. She and Tian Jizi were acquaintances in the Dian dynasty. Tian Jizi and Pang Xiao might have had a master-servant relationship. Although Khan is born rich, his fate is not unique. Sometimes, when two people's fates are too similar, it's fine if they are separated. However, if they meet, it's hard to say who will steal the other's fate. In this humble Taoist's opinion, although the Khan and Princess Consort Zhongshuan come from different backgrounds, different countries, and different ages, the fate of the two of you and the entanglement between the two of you are extremely similar. So, it's very likely that Qin will steal the prince's consort. Anari's eyes widened and he gritted his teeth. The prince's consort has always been loyal to Ben Khan. How can an outsider interfere in our relationship? If such a day really comes, it will be Qin who seduces the prince's consort. Tian Jizi smiled and shook his head. Khan, you're wrong. The Qin clan is not frivolous and seductive. Are you speaking for her? No, Khan. I'm just telling the truth. However, although the Qin clan is not seductive and will not take the initiative to seduce others, her appearance is already a sin. If she doesn't take the initiative, free people will take the initiative to approach her. So you're saying that the prince's consort will like her? Anari suddenly stood up and looked at Tian Jizi in surprise. Chapter 488. Anari stood rooted to the ground, as if nothing could catch her eye no matter how beautiful the scenery was. Her mind was filled with Tianji's words, replaying them in her ears over and over again. After two people with the same fate met, it was uncertain who would steal whose fate. No wonder her relationship with Si Qin had been so tense recently. She could already feel that the distance between her and Si Qin was gradually getting further and further. But who was she? How could her status be compared to Qin Yining's? Fate. She did not believe that a dead person could have fate. Tianji smiled as he looked at Inari. After a long time, he smiled and said, "Khan." Inari regained her senses and smiled, "Thank you for your guidance today, Master." Tianji bowed solemnly to Inari and said gently, "You don't have to thank me, Khan. I was really afraid. You are the chosen one, your fate is extraordinary, and you will achieve great things in the future. Everything now is just a small fork in the road to success. You just have to take it. You are not an ordinary person, and there is no need for you to be hindered by irrelevant people or things." Inari felt warmth in her heart and said emotionally, "Thank you, Master. Ben Khan knows that he is the irreplaceable king of the Taytan. Ben Khan is responsible for the safety of the Taytan nation. It's just a small stone, I just have to kick it away. You have great ambitions, Khan. I really admire you." Tianji smiled. The two strolled around and chatted. After a while, Inari said that she still had matters to attend to and left. After Inari left and there was no one else around, Mu Jinghu frowned and looked at Tianji. "Uncle, what did you mean by what you said just now? If you keep talking like that, you'll make the Khan hate the Qin clan." Tianji yawned and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes with his fingers. He said lazily, "I know that you have a good relationship with Pang Zhishi. You've helped him before and protected his wife. However, you didn't help him because you owed him that one time. After you helped him, you don't owe him anything anymore. Your task now is to protect me. Why are you asking so many unnecessary questions? Could it be that you're soft-hearted and want to help the Qin clan escape?" Mu Jinghu pursed his lips and stood beside Tianji. After a long while, he said, "I have never disobeyed Martial Uncle's instructions. However, Peng Zhishi and I are friends. Although the reason I helped him before was because I owed him that one time, I didn't repay him just because I owed him something. That way, it wouldn't be a friend helping me, but a transaction." Tianji cast a sidelong glance at Mu Jinghu and said slowly, "I only thought of you as an obedient blockhead. Even Pang Zhishi called you a blockhead. I didn't expect you to be so sentimental." Mu Jinghu pursed his lips and lowered his head. He didn't know how to respond. However, he still remembered his relationship with Pang Xiao. There was no reason for him to be completely indifferent when his wife was in trouble. Mu Jinghu was caught in a dilemma. When Qin Yining returned to the hall, she was strictly guarded by two old nannies who suddenly appeared. Except for the Khan summons, she was not allowed to go out or see anyone. Qin Yining knew that she was a prisoner, so if she was not allowed to go out, she would not go out either. However, when Lu Heng came to see her a few times, he was forcefully stopped by the guards outside. He became more and more uneasy and worried. Since he couldn't see her, he didn't know how Qin Yining was doing. If she was bullied, injured, or sick, with Inari's temper, then Qin Yining would be dead for sure. When he was not allowed to enter, Lu Heng stood at the door and said, "Princess, are you well? This one is Lu Heng. I'm here to see you." Qin Yining was in the inner room. In fact, she had heard Lu Heng's voice many times before. However, Lu Heng always spoke in Taytan language. He spoke so quickly that she understood that he was arguing with someone. She couldn't interrupt even if she wanted to. This time, Lu Heng used a language that she was familiar with. Qin Yining immediately stood up and walked around the screen. She replied, I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, Second Master Lu. Hearing her weak voice, Lu Heng sighed and said, hang in there. I'll think of a way to get you out and lift your confinement. Chapter 489. Lu Heng abruptly turned his head and saw a Nari wearing a red robe with narrow sleeves and a white leather hat. She had bright makeup on her face as she walked over with her hands clasped behind her back. She walked with her head held high, and the beads on her chest swayed as she walked. She held a whip in her hand, and the red tassel on the tip of the whip and the bell on her wrist swayed, making a pleasant tinkling sound. Lu Heng suppressed his anger and cupped his hands in greeting, Khan. I didn't expect that after Ben Khan locked that bitch up for 2 days, she still had the ability to seduce you. Don't you know that she's just a withered flower with a false appearance? Don't you feel that she's degrading herself by seducing you? Don't tell me you only care about her appearance. Lu Heng's face was cold and solemn as he said, in Dezhou, there's a saying, if there's a flower in the heart, then there's a flower in the eyes. Khan, you saw a man and a woman talking a few words, and you thought that the other party was doing something improper. You used the most vicious and dirty angle to speculate. Why is that? You. Anari narrowed her eyes in anger and said in a deep voice, are you saying that Ben Khan's heart is dirty and vicious? Lu Heng didn't answer, and only raised the corner of his lips coldly. Even if he didn't answer, the ridicule was very obvious. Anari was so angry that her face turned red. Just as she was about to scold him, Lu Heng beat her to it again. Lu Heng's voice was slow and gentle, but every word was like a knife. Khan, you're a smart person. You should know what the Taitan people need now. Don't tell me that Khan ascended to this position not to benefit the people, but to show off his power. How dare you? Who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to talk to Ben Khan like that? Anari was furious. What the Taitan people need, Ben Khan has the final say. Do you mean that if I offend you verbally, the Taitan people won't have a good life? Lu, don't be too arrogant. The guards beside him also drew their swords and pointed them at Lu Heng. Although Lu Heng knew some martial arts, it was only limited to strengthening his body. If he were to fight with his life on the line, he would only end up losing his life. Moreover, with his status, he had bodyguards by his side all year round. When had he ever been so passive? The Taitan man was tall and strong. His eyes were as big as copper bells, and he looked as if he wanted to eat his flesh. Lu Heng had a knife pointed at him, and the other party was so aggressive. It would be a lie if he didn't feel nervous. However, he didn't back down at all. Instead, he took a step forward and pressed his chest against the blade of the guard at the front. If the guard's hand trembled, it was very likely that his chest would be pierced. When the guard met Lu Heng's eyes, he was stunned and did not dare to move. Coupled with the impact of the wooden door, Qin Yining and the 2 accompanying old nannies in the hall were startled. Someone opened the door from outside. The 2 old nannies immediately went forward and bowed to Anari with their hands on their chests. Khan. Anari looked at Qin Yining angrily. Her red lips gradually pressed into a line. She did not spare a glance at Qin Yining. She casually waved her hand and signaled for everyone to leave. No one dared to disobey. Naturally, they bowed and left. Qin Yining frowned as he looked at Anari who was walking towards him step by step. His hands behind his back gradually clenched. What orders does Khan have? Just say it. You have guts. That day, she had sized up Qin Yining from head to toe. She did not expect that locking her up would not diminish her sharpness. Instead, it made her look like a willow branch swaying in the wind. Anari sneered as she walked closer. She lifted her chin with the whip and forced her to look at her. She stared at her with burning eyes. Chin clan. You're really good at seducing men. Why don't you teach Ben Khan a lesson? Chin Yining had long been tired of Anari's resentful attitude. Khan has repeatedly slandered me because you don't have the confidence to capture your man's heart. You know in your heart that there is nothing between me and your Khan. If you have any doubts, you should use them on Si Chin. As a woman, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't have the heart to harm others, but you should always guard against others. But Khan has done the exact opposite. Chapter 490. How could Chin Yining just stand there and let her hit him? She grabbed the whip that Anari swung at her. Even though she felt a burning pain in her hand, as if she had grabbed the barbs on the whip, she still held it tightly without batting an eyelid. Chin Yining had a lot of strength. Anari angrily tugged at the whip a few times, but she couldn't get it back. Instead, because they were fighting for the whip, the two of them got closer. Let go of me. Anari gritted her teeth. Chin Yining looked straight at Anari with her beautiful eyes and said in a low voice, Khan, as a woman, it's normal to be jealous for love. It's understandable. But you're not an ordinary woman. You're the ruler of Titan. Now that you've ascended to this position, everything you do must be for the sake of this country. You can't spend all your time thinking about love. I can tell you that there's something wrong with your son-in-law. He's not interested in me, but he's been acting like this to mislead you. The son-in-law has a higher reputation among the Titan people than you, Khan. Don't tell me that you still need me to break it down and tell you what your son-in-law wants to do. Anari's pupils shrank. Her voice trembled as she said, You're talking nonsense. Khan, you know very well whether I'm talking nonsense or not. The reason why Khan's heart was pierced by my words is because you also have the same feeling. Chin Yining was telling the truth. But she didn't forget that Anari was on the opposite side of Dezhou. She told her this out of kindness. In fact, Chin Yining felt pity for Anari. This woman was too simple-minded. She wasn't Si Chin's opponent at all. During her time in Titan, she saw through Si Chin's motives. When she thought about their past, she felt sad and pitiful. But Anari was blinded by love. She was jealous and ignored Si Chin's little tricks behind her back. Now that she reminded Anari, if Anari could guard against Si Chin, then Pang Zhao's enemies would be weaker in the future. It wouldn't be bad for them, and she could even help this woman. This wasn't a bad thing for her. If Anari stubbornly insisted on using Si Chin, then there's nothing more to say. Anari's lips trembled as she glared at Chin Yining. Don't try to drive a wedge between me and my son-in-law. Do you think you can get him and take Ben Khan's place like this? You're dreaming. Titan is Ben Khan's son-in-law. Who do you think you are? As soon as she finished speaking, Anari threw away the whip and grabbed Chin Yining's neck. Chin Yining was caught off guard. He didn't care about the whip anymore and hurriedly pried her hand away. The barbs on the whip had cut into her tender palm. Now, when her right hand touched Anari's hand, there was a large amount of warm and slippery blood. Anari was shocked by the sudden touch and her hand hesitated for a moment. Chin Yining saw this opportunity and hurriedly kicked Anari away. Anari was kicked in the abdomen. The pain made her suck in a breath of cold air. She staggered back a few steps and fell to the ground. Chin Yining couldn't stop coughing. The blood on his hand dyed his collar and sleeves red. Even his lapel and skirt were stained with blood. Anari was furious. She screamed and rushed forward again. She wanted to strangle Chin Yining again. Chin Yining hurriedly reached out to stop her. Right at this moment, the unlatched door of the hall was pushed open by someone. Si Chin walked in quickly and saw Anami and Chin Yining wrestling with each other. Moreover, both of them had bloodstains on their hands and bodies. Si-chin was really shocked. Calm down. Si-chin quickly walked forward and hugged Anari from behind. Anari crazily reached out to grab Chin Yining's face. Bitch. Chin Yining closed his eyes and looked at Si-chin with a mocking smile. This scheming man still had the face to continue pretending to be affectionate and unrepentant. This kind of person was actually on the same level as Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. This was an insult to Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. Prince Consort Si-chin, please take good care of Khan. Chin Yining's blood-stained finger tapped his temple and sneered. There seems to be something wrong with her here. You should get the best doctor here to take a look. You still dare to provoke Ben Khan at this time. Si-chin, help me kill her. Anari flew into a rage and screamed as she pushed Si-chin. Her sharp voice pierced the eardrums and Anari's crazed expression made people's hair stand on end. Anari's anger was easily stirred up and she was easily angered. Was she really fit to be Khan? Wouldn't she be led by the nose for the rest of her life? Chin Yining looked at everything that was happening in front of her. She even suspected that a normal person wouldn't be so irritable. Perhaps Si-chin had used some despicable means to make Anari become like this. Si-chin held Anari in his arms and checked her hands. Seeing that she was fine, he sighed in relief. He didn't see Chin Yining's gaze and whispered to Anari, Khan, you have to pay attention to your status. If this is seen by the people around you, the news will spread like wildfire. What will happen to Khan's reputation? Anari was already angry and she became even angrier when she heard this. She said in a low voice, if you want Ben Khan to feel better, kill her immediately. Khan, didn't I tell you last time that this woman can't be killed now? You're protecting her. Khan, I'm not protecting her. Calm down. Anari couldn't control her anger and screamed, you really like her. What you said to me last time was all a lie. Khan. Chin Yining couldn't understand what they were talking about. But the content of the quarrel was the same and it was easy to guess. In the end, Anari was so angry that she ran out and took the guards with her. Si-chin looked at Chin Yining and saw that her hand was dripping with blood. He turned around and ordered the nanny, call the doctor. The nanny was originally sent by Anari. But after seeing the interaction between the prince consort and the Khan, she obeyed Si-chin's orders and immediately went to call the doctor. Si-chin didn't say anything and just waited by the side with his arms crossed. He watched as the doctor cleaned and bandaged Chin Yining's hand and stopped the bleeding. Then, he turned and left. From beginning to end, he didn't say a word to Chin Yining. He didn't even look at her. Chin Yining could tell that Si-chin didn't care about her life at all. But Anari must have heard the news that Si-chin had called a doctor for Chin Yining. The door was locked again. Chin Yining sat by the fire and wrapped herself in a blanket, deep in thought. If this continued, her life would be in danger. Si-chin was deliberately angering Anari and pushing her to her death. It was as expected. In the middle of the night, Chin Yining had just fallen asleep when the door to the hall was suddenly pushed open. A group of guards grabbed Chin Yining and stuffed a rag into her mouth. Then, they tied her up and carried her out easily. Chapter 491. Chin Yining's heart was beating wildly. It didn't feel good to be held in someone's hands like an animal. The most important thing was that even if she didn't understand what Anari was saying, it was obvious that the situation was not good. While struggling, Chin Yining unexpectedly met Anari's eyes. She couldn't help but stop struggling. That was the look of someone looking at a dead person. It seemed that she would not be able to escape death tonight. In Japan, she hated her. Si-chin had created an illusion in front of Anari that Si-chin was attracted to her. Anari was not only jealous, but also humiliated by the fact that the position of the Khan's son-in-law had been snatched away. Today, Tianjizi saw her and said that her fate was similar to Anari's. After she left, she didn't know what she said to Anari, but it was possible that this was the root cause of the current situation. Tianjizi wanted her dead. Why? Wasn't she Pang Zhao's person? Why didn't she help her, but instead wanted to harm her? Now that Tianjizi wanted to harm her, Pang Zhao didn't know Tianjizi's true nature. If she blindly trusted her, would she be the next person to be harmed? Qin Yining was now angry and anxious. She wanted to struggle, but she couldn't. She wanted to call for help, but her mouth was stuffed with rags. She wanted to leave some clues for Pang Zhao, but there was nothing she could do. She could only be carried out like a bag. With the Khan holding the line, the guards quietly opened the doors wide for them. Not long after, Anari led a group of people out of the palace. When they arrived outside the palace, they found that there were not many people on the streets, even though there was no curfew. Qin Yining was thrown onto the back of a horse, lying in front of the saddle. Her hands were tied behind her back, making it impossible for her to struggle. It was even difficult for her to balance herself and not fall off the horse. The man who had just tied her up immediately jumped onto the horse and held her back, which stopped her from sliding down. Anari led a group of people and carried Qin Yining to a secluded street. After turning left and right, they soon arrived outside a spacious courtyard. Qin Yining was lifted off the horse's back and carried into the courtyard by the two men. When they reached the main room, they threw him on the ground. Anari came in with his hands clasped behind his back. As soon as he entered the door, he threw away his red cloak and wore only a maroon robe with narrow sleeves. Then, he whipped his Qin Yining a few times. Anari was merciless and full of strength. Her whip was also barbed. With a single lash, it tore through the thick robe and left a bloody mark on the skin. Qin Yining trembled in pain and broke out in cold sweat. Unfortunately, her hands and feet were tied and she could not run away. She could only curl up her body and hide her face between her knees. Anari vented her anger by whipping her while cursing in Taitan, "Slut! Who told you to seduce the prince consort? I'm going to kill you. Kill you." Even if Qin Yining did not understand what Anari was saying, she now completely understood. It seemed that her guess was right. Anari was really provoked and hurriedly took her out in the middle of the night to execute her in private. Anari whipped her a few more times until she saw her skin split open. Then, she threw down the whip and panted heavily with her hands on her waist. She mocked in Dezhou's language, "How is it? Ben Khan personally serves you to make your blood flow better. Do you feel good?" Qin Yining's mouth was gagged and she could not say a word. She could only stare at Anari. Anari seemed to be very satisfied with her current state. He simply squatted beside her and grabbed her hair. He leaned closer to her and said, "You have to know that this is Taitan. This is Ben Khan's territory. If Ben Khan wants you to live, you can live. If Ben Khan wants you to die, no one dares to stop you. I heard that you seduced the prince consort. Are you very proud? I heard that you want Ben Khan's throne. Today, even if you die here, it will be quiet. No one will know. Aren't you very powerful and noble? How about this, you kowtow to Ben Khan. If Ben Khan is satisfied, he might let you live. How about that?" After Anari finished speaking, he covered his mouth and laughed. The more he laughed, the more carefree he became. It was as if the depression that had accumulated for so many days had been swept away. Qin Yining still maintained her curled-up position when she was whipped. Her face was stained with her own blood, which made her eyes look even brighter and sharper. It was as if she could see through people's hearts and see through everything. Kowtow. Even if she died, she would never lose her dignity as the one who did it. Humiliating her was the same as humiliating her father and husband. She was alone in Titan. If she did anything shameful, people would only talk about the women from Dezhou. Anyway, she had already fallen into Inari's hands. When she was kidnapped to Titan, Qin Yining had already mentally prepared herself to lose her life. Now that she saw Inari proudly declaring victory in front of her, she just sighed. She did not want to kowtow and beg for mercy, which was what Inari wanted. Seeing Qin Yining's indifference, Inari angrily grabbed her hair and lifted her in front of her. "You're not going to beg for mercy." Although Qin Yining's mouth was gagged, her eyes seemed to be able to speak. They silently conveyed her disdain for Inari. Inari seemed to be provoked by Qin Yining's actions. She gritted her teeth and said, "Aren't you afraid of death?" "Oh, Ben Khan knows. You are the daughter of Panan, the wife of Prince Zhongshuan. People like you think highly of themselves. You don't care about life and death. You won't beg for mercy from Ben Khan, will you?" Qin Yining narrowed her eyes slightly, as if to say, "You're smart." Inari sneered. Suddenly, she had an idea and said, "You're not afraid of death, but aren't you afraid of being played by others?" Qin Yining's pupils suddenly shrank. Inari was like a child who had found a new toy. She pointed to the 8 strong men behind her and said, "There aren't many women like you in the Titan. My men are all warriors. They haven't tasted anything fresh yet. If you kowtow to me, I won't give you to them. I'll give you a quick death and leave your corpse intact. How about it?" Qin Yining's eyes were like 2 clusters of flames. They were so bright that they seemed to burn through Inari and melt her. She did not expect that as a woman, Inari would use such a dirty method to humiliate her. Inari was inexplicably irritated by her gaze. "Are you convinced? If you apologize to Ben Khan will leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, I'll give you to the 8 of them and let them take turns playing with you." Qin Yining sneered and simply closed her eyes and did not look at her. His attitude of complete disdain made Inari angry. She threw her away and pointed to the people behind her. "She's yours. Play as much as you want. If she dies, then it's her bad luck. Ben Khan won't blame her." Yes. The 8 men were already tempted. They could not believe that they would be able to taste such a beautiful woman. Even if the 8 of them were together, it would still make them excited. Chapter 492. Qin Yining tried her best to take a deep breath and calm herself down. She told herself that she couldn't panic. Only by calmly analyzing the situation could she not miss any opportunity to escape or fight back. However, her body was still trembling uncontrollably. She kept twisting and struggling to retreat. The rough rope scratched her arms and wrists, leaving a few scratches. Together with the wounds left by the whip just now, Qin Yining was in so much pain that her face turned pale. However, her eyes were frighteningly bright. Even though she was in such a sorry state and was covered in blood, it didn't hide her beauty at all. The 8 strong men became more and more excited. They screamed and rushed toward Qin Yining. Inari was very pleased with herself. She crossed her arms and watched the show proudly. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Let's see how proud you can be in the future. Enjoy yourself. Our Titan men are much stronger than your Dezhou men." Ha! Qin Yining's mouth was stuffed with a rag, so she couldn't curse even if she wanted to. She was so angry that her eyes turned red and she whimpered. The strong men were already in front of her. The 2 men who arrived first were very anxious. One of them went to take off his clothes, and the other went to untie Qin Yining's bound legs. Qin Yining gritted her teeth. all her struggles were stopped by them. Once the restraints on her legs were released, she kicked fiercely at the vital part of the man closest to her. However, her kick was caught by him. They were all Inari's personal bodyguards. Qin Yining was only a little stronger, but she didn't know any martial arts. At this time, she was completely helpless. Qin Yining's heart was gradually filled with despair. Although she repeatedly comforted herself that it was nothing. She would just treat it as being bitten by a dog. However, what woman wouldn't care about something like this? Her round eyes gradually filled with tears. At this time, she hoped that Pang Xiao would suddenly appear and kill all these people. However, Qin Yining also knew that it was impossible. Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu lived under Li Qitian's surveillance. How could they sneak into Taitan and just happen to arrive? Moreover, there were so many people in the Qin family and the Pang family in the capital. Pang Xiao was not alone. Didn't he have to consider the safety of his family? Qin Yining understood this. However, she still couldn't help but cry. Inari looked to see Qin Yining in such a sorry state. She was full of interest, as if she was going to enjoy a good show here. Unexpectedly, when the leading man tore Qin Yining's clothes and made the sound of cloth tearing, the wooden door was suddenly blown open by a gust of wind. Then, a black shadow floated in like a ghost. Inari was dumbfounded. She didn't even have time to see clearly before the 8 men's blood splattered on the spot and they fell to the ground with a plop. It was obvious that they had just been dealt with. Qin Yining endured the pain and walked to Inari. She said in a low voice, "Things have already come to this. Does Khan still want to be stubborn? I know that Khan cares about the Emperor's son-in-law. I also know that Khan wants me dead. But in Khan's heart, isn't the Emperor's son-in-law's impression more important? Khan also knows that your country's Emperor's son-in-law is discussing some cooperation with the Liu family. If you're willing to let us go, not only will I not have to appear in front of the Emperor's son-in-law, the Liu family's discussion with the Emperor's son-in-law will not be affected by Khan's actions. It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. What does Khan think?" Inari was so angry that her face turned red. At this time, she didn't have the rationality to think about the cause and effect. "What do you think? You vixens still have the nerve to ask. How did you ruin things tonight? Otherwise, I'll kill you. If you have the ability, kill me now. Let's see how a vixen like you can escape from the hands of the Taitan warriors." Qin Yining saw how resolute that day was. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. More than a dozen of your country's warriors have already lost their lives because of Khan's impulsive decision. Is Khan still not satisfied? Don't tell me that Ben Khan killed them. Don't be hypocritical here. I won't let you go. Why don't you kill me now? Otherwise, I'll teach you a lesson. Qin Yining pursed her lips. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Lu Heng suddenly raise his hand and hit Inari hard on the back of her neck. Inari's eyes glazed over. Then, she closed her eyes and fell to the ground. Qin Yining asked in surprise, "What happened?" Chapter 493. Qin Yining nodded. Enduring the pain in his body, he turned around and smiled at the masked man in black. "Young Master Mu, thank you very much." That man's body stiffened, and he said stiffly, You don't have to hide it. We've known each other for quite some time. How could I not recognize your figure and facial features? You came to save me without telling your martial uncle, right?" Mu Jinghu pulled down the black cloth covering his face, and looked at Qin Yining somewhat guiltily. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. Lu Heng said, "This is not a place to stay for long. Let's leave quickly and find a place to hide." "Okay." The 3 of them left the courtyard, and under Mu Jinghu's guidance, they went further and further away. At the same time, Anari opened her eyes in a daze, and immediately hissed in pain from her neck. Just as she was about to struggle to get up, she saw a pair of men's boots in front of her. Anari raised her head and saw Si Qin standing in front of her, dressed in a brocade robe. "Prince Consort, you're here." Anari immediately stood up, one hand rubbing her neck, the other tugging at Si Qin's sleeve and acting coquettishly. "Did you find out that I wasn't in the palace, so you came looking for me?" Qin Yining, that bitch, actually colluded with a wild man to escape. She even injured me. My neck hurts. Si Qin smiled tenderly at Anari, his long arms wrapped around her, and his large hand rubbed her neck. "Does it hurt here?" Anari closed her eyes, her forehead resting on Si Qin's shoulder. "It's here. That Lu Heng kidnapped me, and even knocked me out." Lu Heng also brought along a highly skilled subordinate, compared to my... Anari's voice stopped abruptly. She lowered her head in disbelief, and looked at the bloody hole in her chest. The blood-stained dagger was in the hands of the man she loved deeply. "You!" Another slash of the knife pierced into her abdomen. The intense pain and the shock of being struck by lightning caused her eyes to widen. A line of blood appeared at the corner of her lips. "Si Qin, I've treated you well. I love you so much. Why did you?" Another slash. After the third stab, Si Qin slowly laid Anari flat on the ground. His eyes were filled with tenderness as he said in a low and hoarse voice, "Rest in peace. I will rule Tayton and unify the world. I will also avenge the people from Dezhou who killed you." Blood continued to flow out. Anari's body twitched, and his eyes were filled with anger and sorrow. She never thought that she would die in the hands of this man. All of a sudden, she remembered the hints he had given her several times in Qin Yining. At that time, she had said that Si Qin's voice was too loud among the people and that they held too much power. Could it be that Qin Yining had noticed something since then? She hated herself for being such an idiot. She only thought about love and didn't even take Qin Yining's words to heart. Qin Yining smiled and nodded, "All right, thank you very much. Actually, I am very surprised and happy that you were able to come and help today." Mu Jinghu shook his head and said, "Today, I also happened to see Second Master Lu walking behind the Khan's group. I was curious so I followed you. I also didn't expect that the Khan would go and catch you in the middle of the night. The Khan suspects my relationship with the Prince Consort and has long disliked me. In addition, Tian Jizi said that the Khan's fate and mine were similar. I knew that the Khan wanted to kill me." Qin Yining smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Tian Jizi and I can be considered old acquaintances. I didn't expect that she would harm me." Mu Jinghu lowered his head, his expression full of awkwardness. Not to mention that Qin Yining didn't understand, even he, who followed Tian Jizi every day, didn't know what was wrong with his martial uncle. Why did he have to sow discord between the Khan and the Prince Consort and incite the Khan to kill Qin Yining? Mu Jinghu also knew that perhaps he wasn't smart enough and that his martial uncle didn't want to talk to him. However, he still remembered his friendship with Pang Xiao. He also felt that Qin Yining was a good person and shouldn't lose his life. That was why he couldn't help but come out in the middle of the night to check on him. Chapter 494. Seeing Mu Jinghu's helpless look, Qin Yining also knew that he was stuck between Tian Jizi and Pang Xiao and was in a difficult position. Mu Jinghu was an honest person. He had received orders from his real master, who was now his grandmaster, to protect Tian Jizi. Since he had promised, he would definitely not go back on his word. Actually, he had already disobeyed Tian Jizi's orders by coming to save her this time. It was very risky. Looking at Tian Jizi's appearance, she must be in an important position in the Taitan royal family. If she knew that Mu Jinghu had ruined her plans, who knew how she would deal with him? Although Mu Jinghu was skilled in martial arts, Tian Jizi could not defeat him. However, the problem was that Mu Jinghu was too honest and would not fight back in front of her martial uncle. She could now see that with Tian Jizi's temperament, she would also not show mercy to Mu Jinghu. Qin Yining thought of this and said, "You should go back quickly. If your martial uncle finds out, I'm afraid it won't be good. I'll talk to Second Master Lu about it. When the city gates are opened, we'll think of a way to get out." Mu Jinghu shook his head and said, "Forget it. I'm afraid that the Khan will immediately search when he wakes up. I'll go out to investigate first and find some food, clothes, and medicine for your injuries. If you fall sick now, it will be difficult in the future. It's okay. These are all superficial wounds. My body is very good, it won't affect me much." Qin Yining was actually in a lot of pain, but the situation was special now. She could only endure it. Mu Jinghu had already gone against his master to save her. He had done his utmost for her, the wife of his friend, and had already done his best to go against his master. She did not want to add to his troubles. Mu Jinghu thought about it but shook his head and insisted, "You still have to be more careful. If you leave the capital, your days outside will be difficult. At that time, it's still not certain whether there will be conditions for healing, but at the very least, we have to prepare some medicinal herbs and some necessities." After Mu Jinghu finished speaking, he waved his hand to signal Qin Yining to stop trying to persuade him. He then turned around and walked out of the door. When Lu Heng saw that Mu Jinghu had walked far away, he sighed softly and said, "It's all thanks to this righteous man this time. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to fight against the Khan's guards alone. It seems that birds of a feather flock together. Peng Zhishi's good friend is naturally a martial artist like him." Qin Yining sat down on the shabby wooden couch and let out a long sigh. "That's Wang Ye's old friend. His martial uncle is a Tian Jizi. This time, I feel that Tian Jizi provoked the Khan, which is why she was so agitated to try to kill me." Lu Heng nodded. He would not ask about the relationship between Tian Jizi and Pang Xiao in detail. However, the matter of Tian Jizi provoking a Nari this time was very strange. Tian Jizi is an expert who is out of this world. She shouldn't be someone who would casually gossip. There must be a reason for what she did. Qin Yining nodded and leaned tiredly against the wall behind him. She definitely isn't someone who would stir up trouble for no reason. However, the more she acts like this, the more troublesome the matter is. Yes. Because of this, I feel that there must be a conspiracy. Lu Heng said somewhat helplessly, "There's no point in thinking too much. The most important thing now is that we can leave this place alive. After experiencing the earthquake and crossing the desert, we've endured so many hardships. If we capsize here, don't you think the two of us will feel aggrieved?" Seeing that Lu Heng was still in the mood to joke in such a disadvantageous situation, Qin Yining could not help but admire him. Perhaps people who could reach Lu Heng's current position were not psychologically weak. It was not that they did not feel fear and panic, but they were able to control their emotions very well. They always kept themselves cold and calm, and were able to keep their minds in the clearest state. Therefore, there were some things that they would not make mistakes in their judgment. In fact, Qin Yining was really scared today. At that time, he could brace himself and persuade himself that at worst, he could just treat it as being bitten by a dog. However, now that he thought about how he had been surrounded by Inari's guards, and how he had looked at them obscenely, when Qin Yining saw the despair on Xia's face, he felt really uncomfortable in his heart. If they really did something, he did not know what kind of extreme things he could do. Thinking in his heart for only a moment, Qin Yining smiled freely and said, "You're right. Great winds and great waves have passed. If the boat capsizes in the gutter, it would be very unjust. Lu Heng gazed at Qin Yining's side profile, his eyes filled with gentle and warm love. You're right. You're injured, you should rest for a while. Qin Yining smiled and said, that's good too. You should also rest for a while and recharge your energy. We've knocked out the Khan and escaped, who knows how she'll kick up a fuss when she wakes up. When the time comes, she'll definitely mobilize all of her troops to capture us. Lu Heng sat down about a foot away from Qin Yining. There was only one dilapidated wooden couch in this dilapidated house, so Qin Yining naturally did not mind sitting down with Lu Heng. Besides, they were running for their lives right now, so why would they care about such things? Lu Heng was also an upright gentleman, so Qin Yining really did not need to worry about anything. Qin Yining closed his eyes and fell into a light sleep. However, Lu Heng did not sleep. Through the roof that lacked tiles above his head, he looked at the few stars in the pitch-black sky that flickered between bright and dark. In his mind, he was constantly calculating the routes they could take when they left. They must escape back to Dezhou. If they went around the desert, which direction should they take? Just as Qin Yining closed his eyes to rest and Lu Heng frowned in deep thought, Mu Jinghu suddenly came in and said anxiously in a low voice, something happened outside. Qin Yining opened his eyes and asked with a frown, what happened? Lu Heng also frowned with a serious expression. Mu Jinghu said, the Khan was assassinated. It said that the two of you worked together to kill her. The prince consort has already summoned all the civil and military officials to the court to discuss this matter. All the guards in the city have been activated and are now searching the entire city for the two of you. Lu Heng was stunned, but I didn't kill her, I only knocked her out. Mu Jinghu said, but the people outside said that they saw the prince consort carrying the Khan, who was covered in blood. It said that the Khan was stabbed 3 times and her blood was all drained. The people in the city are now in a state of panic and anger. Qin Yining pursed his lips. Thinking about Si Qin's attitude towards her, Anari's jealousy towards her, and Tian Jizi's actions, the answer was obvious. I'm afraid that Si Qin and Tian Jizi had a lot of discussions to make Anari jealous of me and want to kill me quickly. Tian Jizi's words to Anari were the last straw that broke the camel's back. Today, even if the two of you did not come to save me, Si Qin would not have let me die. Because Si Qin's target is Anari's life. Chapter 495. He has already been blinded by his desire for power, so why would he care about feelings? Perhaps from the start, he never had any romantic feelings for me. Everything he did to get close to me was to mislead Anari and make Anari think that there was something going on between us. He wanted to make Anari jealous and do something that was beneficial to his plan. Si Qin is taking advantage of Anari's deep feelings for him. He wanted Anari dead from the start. We didn't hurt Anari because we wanted to maintain diplomatic relations between the Taitan and Dezhou. However, Si Qin's goal was to frame us from the start. The more Qin Yining spoke, the more frightened he became. Si Qin's scheming was unimaginable. He was afraid that Si Qin had gone to Yang County to kidnap them in order to achieve his goal today. Lu Heng frowned and said, we can't go on like this. Once Si Qin succeeds in ascending to the throne, I'm afraid his next step will be to use Anari's death as an excuse to make a request to Dezhou. But what should the two of you do? Mu Jinghu's expression became more and more unsightly. He was a pure-hearted, loyal, and affectionate person. Not only could he not think of doing something as crazy as Si Qin's, but he also could not accept it if someone else wanted him to harm others. Moreover, it was something like killing a woman who loved him deeply for the sake of power and the throne. How could a person do something like this? We can't stay here any longer. If they search the entire place, I'm afraid they'll find us here very quickly. Lu Heng said anxiously. Mu Jinghu immediately nodded and placed the large cloth bag in front of Qin Yining. Apply your medicine first and change into this set of clothes. It'll be more convenient for you to wear men's clothes when you go out. He turned around and called for Lu Heng. Let's go out first. Lu Heng nodded and followed Mu Jinghu to the door to discuss the countermeasures in a low voice. Qin Yining took off his clothes, soaked his old clothes in water, and roughly wiped the bloodstains off his body. After cleaning his wounds, he took out some ointment and a thin cotton cloth to bandage his wounds. Finally, he changed into men's clothes, combed his hair into a neat bun, and put on a leather hat that was commonly worn by Taitan men in winter. Qin Yining wrapped up the rest of the silks and satins and wanted to find a place to burn them. He rearranged the water bags, dry rations, and medicine in the bundle before calling the two of them in. Mu Jinghu said anxiously, when I went to scout the area just now, I found out that there are already some guards who are on their way here. Let's get out of here. Qin Yining nodded hurriedly and carried the bundle with Lu Heng as they followed Mu Jinghu out. When the three of them reached the entrance of the alley, they could hear the shouts and screams of people searching the houses of the people from afar. The children were crying, the adults were screaming, and it was very chaotic. Even though there was a language barrier, Qin Yining could guess what these people were saying. They were probably asking if they had seen them. Mu Jinghu hurriedly grabbed Qin Yining's wrist and gestured to Lu Heng to follow him. The three of them quietly retreated and ran far away. In the middle of the night, they turned in the alley. They could only hear their breathing and footsteps, and the sounds of the guards searching in the distance. Lu Heng said in a low voice, if this goes on, we will definitely be caught. I think they are searching from house to house, even the wells are not spared. Mu Jinghu's expression was also very serious. The city gates are now closed and the people searching are right in front of us. If this goes on, we will be caught sooner or later. Do you have any other place to hide in the city? Qin Yining asked. Mu Jinghu shook his head and said in shame, I usually only stay in the palace with Marshal Uncle. I have never thought of living outside, so naturally I have not bought a house. In this situation, even if you buy a house, it will not help. After finding a corner to hide in, Mu Jinghu frowned in worry. Now, even if he brought along two people who were highly skilled in martial arts, they might not be able to escape unscathed. Moreover, Lu Heng only knew the basic skills of horseback archery, and Qin Yining was a woman who was full of injuries. The three of them looked at each other. Mu Jinghu suddenly got up and was about to go out. I will go and lure those people away. No. Qin Yining pulled him back. I know your martial arts are very good and those people are no match for you, but can you kill all the guards? You are like a metal plate, how many nails can you crush? We can't be reckless, we have to be smart. Even if we can't escape and get caught, we don't have to worry. They will not kill me and second Master Lu. Because with Si Qin's personality, he will definitely use up all of our value before giving up. They will use us to negotiate with Dezhou. Mu Jinghu shook his head and said, he will use you to negotiate with Dezhou, but with Pang Zhishi's current situation in Dezhou, how can he persuade the Emperor of Dezhou? If the Emperor of Dezhou does not agree, won't the two of you lose your lives? Let me go and lure them away, you two think of a way to escape. Lu Heng also pulled Mu Jinghu back. No, if you go now, not only will you expose yourself, you might even lose your life. If our lives are built on your sacrifice, we will not be able to rest in peace for the rest of our lives. Qin Yining also said, Young Master Mu, you have nothing to do with this matter. You have already done your duty by saving our lives. You should hurry back before the pursuers arrive. Now that such a big thing has happened outside, the Tianjizi must have sensed something. If they realize that you are missing, they will definitely be suspicious. Won't you be betraying your sect then? Mu Jinghu was a loyal person, but when he heard the words betraying his sect, his brows furrowed even more. Qin Yining said again, hurry up and leave. When it's convenient, send a message to Pang Zhishi and tell him that Second Master Lu and I are still alive. Don't do anything else, lest you draw trouble to yourself. Mu Jinghu lowered his head and pondered for a long time. Then, he stubbornly shook his head. No, I will accompany you. With me around, we can still fight our way out of the encirclement. If the two of you get caught, you will really be caught. As they spoke, they shuttled through the alleys as usual, constantly avoiding their pursuers. However, from the sound of their voices, they could already tell that they were very close to each other. Young Master Mu, hurry up and leave. If you don't leave now, you won't be able to leave either. Qin Yining urged anxiously. Mu Jinghu gritted his teeth and shook his head again. He pulled Qin Yining and Lu Heng along and continued to hide. However, the people living in this area were the lowest class of poor people and slaves. The alleys were narrow and crisscrossed, and many of them were dead ends. Mu Jinghu pulled Qin Yining and Lu Heng along as they turned left and right. Panting, they reached the depths of an alley. When they realized that there was no way out, they hurriedly turned back. Before entering, Qin Yining pointed at the cloth hanging on Mu Jinghu's chin. Mu Jinghu then remembered that he had to cover his face. He quickly covered his face and smiled gratefully at Qin Yining. It was a spacious brick house. There was a bonfire lit in the hall. There were more than 30 old and weak women and children in ragged clothes gathered here. When they saw the boy bring Qin Yining and the other two in, there was a moment of silence in the hall. Everyone looked over. Another boy who was slightly taller came over with a frown. Harbala, who are these people you brought with you? Lu Heng turned around and whispered to Qin Yining, so this boy is called Harbala. It means black tiger in Taitan. Qin Yining nodded. Harbala said, they are the warriors who killed the female Khan. They are being chased by the minions. I happened to run into them and let them in. But there are still the old and weak in our tribe here. If we are discovered, and how can you be sure that they are the warriors who killed the female Khan? Harbala frowned and put his hands on his hips. Shiganbre, are you going back on your word? You were the one who said that whoever could avenge our Abu and Ag would be the new chief of the Minuo tribe. Is that right? All the clansmen had heard it clearly. How can I not help the chief when he is in trouble? That's right. Shiganbre said. Harbala clapped his hands. That's it. The people outside said that the ones who killed the female Khan were a man and a woman from Dezhou. We have seen them before and there are people from Dezhou living in the palace. How can they be wrong? But they are from Dezhou. How can they be the new chief of the Minuo tribe? You didn't say that people from Dezhou were not allowed to be the chief. Besides, whoever killed the female demon would be a warrior and a hero. They would be avenging our dead warriors and our loved ones. If they were caught by the guards outside, how can we face Abu and Ag in the future? Okay, my good brother, you are right. Shiganbre patted Harbala's shoulder. I thought too much. They are the warriors who helped Ag and Abu and our people take revenge. They can be the chiefs of the Minuo tribe now. The conversation between the two teenagers was heard clearly by the people around them. Qin Yining didn't understand what they were saying. Mu Jinghu didn't understand half of it. Lu Heng understood. His eyes flashed with calculation, but he didn't interrupt them immediately. Just like that, Qin Yining looked at the old and weak people in front of him. Under the guidance of the two teenagers, they bowed to them with one hand on their chest and whispered something in unison. Lu Heng turned to Qin Yining and explained the conversation between the two brothers. Then he said, they have already decided that we are the new chiefs of the Minuo tribe. Qin Yining was tongue-tied. That's not good, is it? Lu Heng said, we are alone. If we want to leave Tayton, maybe these people can help us. Besides, they have already decided that you and I are their chiefs. They won't change their minds. If we reject them, they will be sad. Qin Yining said, but we didn't fulfill their request. Since they have already decided, it means that Si Qin has already spread the news outside. Qin Yining was silent for a while. After recognizing the people, Harbala and Shiganbra pulled Qin Yining, Lu Heng, and Mu Jinghu to their seats. They excitedly asked them about their heroic battle record when they killed the female Khan. Qin Yining didn't know the language, so he could only listen quietly with a smile. Although she was wearing men's clothes, her face was extremely beautiful. With one look, one could tell that she was a beautiful woman. The tribe members couldn't take their eyes off her when they saw her charming appearance. Qin Yining took advantage of the chaos and said to Mu Jinghu, you should leave later. We are already safe here. We will think of a way to leave later. Quickly return to your martial uncle's place to prevent any trouble from happening. Don't forget to help me pass the news to Pang Jishi. Chapter 497. Qin Yining naturally knew that Mu Jinghu was in a difficult position. He was a loyal person. Since he had promised his grandmaster that he would protect the Tianjizi, he would not go back on his word. It was already extremely rare for him to go against the Tianjizi's wishes to save them. Naturally, Qin Yining could not hold on to Mu Jinghu and not let him go, even though they really needed the protection of a martial artist like Mu Jinghu. At this time, Lu Heng had already made use of his fluency in Tayton and excellent communication skills to make the Minuo tribesmen present have a very good impression of them. After chatting for a while, Qin Yining whispered to Lu Heng about letting Mu Jinghu go back. Lu Heng then smiled and explained to the tribesmen. Although he did not understand what he said, seeing the understanding smiles on everyone's faces, Qin Yining could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Lu Heng turned to Mu Jinghu and spoke in the Zhou language, since your elders still need you to take care of them, you should go back quickly. Thank you for your help today. As he spoke, he bowed to Mu Jinghu. Mu Jinghu returned the bow and said, I feel very guilty for not being able to continue protecting all of you. Lu Heng smiled and said, you have already helped us a lot, why are you still feeling guilty? If you want to feel guilty, it is because we have implicated you and dragged you into this mess. Mu Jinghu was not good with words and did not know how to make small talk. He only smiled shyly and said goodbye to Lu Heng and Qin Yining again. Shiganbra then stood up and led Mu Jinghu out of the side door. Halbera then led Lu Heng and Qin Yining to a room at the back of the house. There are too many people here. The rooms have been allocated to the women and children. The rest of us are huddled in the front to warm ourselves by the fire. I can tell that the two of you aren't used to sleeping together with others. Just sleep here for the night. I'll think of a way to contact the tribe and think of a way to escape together. Lu Heng smiled and said, all right, I'll leave it to you. Halbera laughed and went away. Qin Yining was already running a fever. The whip scars on her body were deep and shallow. After the initial burning pain, even moving a finger would pull at the scars, causing her to frown in pain. In front of others, she could still maintain her tense state of mind and not reveal the slightest flaw. But now, there was no need for her to continue enduring. When Lu Heng saw Qin Yining's complexion, he knew that her wound must be hurting. He helped her sit down on the bed covered with hay and old bed sheets. Lu Heng asked worriedly, are you okay? Are you feverish? Qin Yining was shivering. She hugged her bag and curled up in the cold corner of the room. She forced a smile and said, "I'm fine. It's normal for my wound to be feverish. I have a good foundation. I'll be fine after some rest. I'll go ask them for some firewood and make a fire here too. We'll boil some hot water for you." Lu Heng was about to leave. Qin Yining hurriedly pulled on his robe. "Don't trouble yourself. The Minuo tribe has been mistreated badly by Inari. Don't you see the 30 or so people gathered around the fire in the front hall? I don't think they can casually use firewood here. No, your wound is serious and you're feverish. We can't be careless. We have to at least let you drink some clean hot water. It wasn't easy for us to escape. Do you think it's worth it to lose your life over such a small matter?" Qin Yining was shivering uncontrollably. Even her fingers were so cold that they clenched into fists. Lu Heng saw that she was getting weaker and weaker. He hurriedly went out to talk to Harbala and Shigambra. When the two heard that Qin Yining had been whipped by Inari, they shook their heads bitterly. "We don't have any medicine here. All the men in our tribe have been killed. The old, the weak, the women, and the children have been forced to work like cattle for the female devil. They're often beaten. Many people have already died from feverish infections caused by their wounds. I'll find a way to get you some firewood. You can use it first. But we don't have a doctor here and we can't afford to hire one." The two youths' faces scrunched up in worry. "It's good enough that we can give her some hot water. Besides, we killed the female Khan. There are pursuers outside. We don't dare to hire a doctor to attract attention," Lu Heng said. The two youths nodded. They helped carry the firewood and went into the room to make a fire. They also set up an old clay pot to boil some water. Qin Yining was in a semi-conscious state. She curled up in a corner and tried to shrink herself into a bowl. Lu Heng used the firelight to see the cold sweat on her forehead and her abnormally flushed face. Her lips were pale. He was so anxious that he couldn't care less about the etiquette between men and women. He quickly reached out and placed his hand on her forehead to check her temperature. So hot. Qin Yining's wounds were all wrapped up by herself. The medicine must not have been applied properly. The wounds really did need to be cleaned and reapplied. Thinking of this, Lu Heng went out to ask for help. Fortunately, there were only the old, weak, women and children here. There were a few old women who had experience in treating wounds and were willing to help. Lu Heng hid outside and asked the old women to help Qin Yining clean her wounds and reapply the medicine. Harbala moved closer to Lu Heng and whispered, "I thought you were a couple with that fairy-like girl. I can see that you care about her a lot. Why don't you take this opportunity to take care of her? That way, you can cultivate feelings and make her appreciate you." Lu Heng shook his head and smiled bitterly. "You don't know, but she's already married. This time, she was captured by Inari and Si Qin. Although I have feelings for her, she's noble and loyal to her husband. I don't want to take advantage of her, and I don't want to force her. If I had stayed to take care of her, she would have been grateful to me, but she would have distanced herself from me." Shigambra laughed when he heard this. "There are so many rules in your tribe. If it was in our Minuo tribe, any girl or warrior that you like can take the initiative to pursue her. If the two of them don't get along, they can apply for separation from the tribe leader. After separation, everyone has their own freedom and can look for someone else. I heard that the girls in your tribe would commit suicide if they were touched. That's not that serious. Normal families have girls who go out in public to make a living. Our tribe has just walked out of the flames of war and hasn't had peace for more than 2 years. Those noble rules can only be used by those noble people. Commoners like us can't be restricted by them. However, what we consider more is morality. Morality. Indeed, only those of us at the bottom would have such thoughts. Noble people like the female Khan never consider morality or immorality when doing things. All they think about is whether they are comfortable or not. Fortunately, that female demon is already dead. Yes. It's all thanks to the two of you. Lu Heng and the Shiganber brothers looked at each other and smiled. Qin Yining tossed and turned for the better part of the night. It was only in the early hours of the next day that the heat gradually subsided. Seeing this, Lu Heng could finally heave a sigh of relief. In the following days, they hid in the house of the Minuo tribe. The streets were under martial law and they didn't dare to walk around casually. They could only gradually inquire about news from the outside world. At this time, in the residence of the Prince Zhongshuan in Dezhou's capital, Peng Xiao looked at the note in his hand and began to tremble. Chapter 498. Peng Xiao was ecstatic. He held the simple note from Mu Jinghu as if he was holding a rare treasure. His unshaven face was filled with ecstasy, and he was so happy that he spun around. Huzi, Su Weiji, and Xia Yu didn't care about their status as master and servant. They all crowded over to read the note. After reading it carefully twice, they shouted with joy, "It really is the princess consort. I didn't expect her to be kidnapped to the Titan. Young Master Mu's letter is really timely. If there is no news of the princess consort's whereabouts, won't Wang Yi go crazy?" Huzi laughed and joked. Su Weiji and Xia Yu finally smiled as if relieved of a heavy burden. Recently, Peng Xiao didn't eat well and couldn't sleep well. He had lost a lot of weight, and his handsome features looked even more angular. Coupled with his messy hair and stubbled chin, he looked extremely dispirited. Ever since he had defied the imperial edict more than 30 times and had no choice but to return to the capital, Peng Xiao hadn't had a single day of peace. Li Qitian's suspicions and jealousy had intensified. There were even a few times when Li Qitian had scolded him in the imperial court and made a fool of him. However, Peng Xiao didn't care about any of this. He just wanted Qin Yining to come back. He knew why he was willing to let Qin Yining go alone to find the whereabouts of the treasure. Although the treasure was very important to them, was it more important than Qin Yining's safety? Peng Xiao didn't know how he lived after returning to the capital. He didn't even dare to see Qin Yining's parents. He started to become violent and couldn't control his temper. He even couldn't help but want to kill Li Qitian whenever he saw him. If he killed him, would Sister Yi be safe? Wouldn't she become a victim of their power struggle? But now, all of his negative emotions disappeared when he saw this note. "Prepare a horse for this king, quick." Peng Xiao finally had the courage to meet Qin Huayuan. Huzi responded with an eye, and hurriedly rushed out to prepare the horses. Xia Yu and Su Weiji also guessed what Peng Xiao was going to do. They hurriedly said, "Wang Yi, should we tell old master, old madam and old madam about this?" Peng Xiao slapped her forehead. "I almost forgot. I'll have to trouble the two of you to help me inform the old man. Just tell him that I'm going to find my father-in-law to discuss a solution." Although Qin Yining was in trouble, the Yao clan didn't seem to be in a hurry. The most anxious ones were Madame Ma and Yao Qinggu. Their grandson was so rebellious and stubborn. Previously, they even thought that Peng Xiao would be lonely for the rest of his life. However, God rewarded him with a virtuous wife who was as beautiful as a flower and had a good temperament. However, good times didn't last long. As soon as they got married, Qin Yining was forced to go to the disaster area with Peng Xiao and didn't come back. Madame Ma had been chanting scriptures and praying to the Bodhisattva these days. She had even begun to practice vegetarianism and prayed devoutly for Qin Yining's safety. When Xia Yu and Su Weiji came, they said that there was news about Qin Yining. Madame Ma immediately smiled from ear to ear and hurriedly went to offer incense to the Bodhisattva to express her gratitude. Yao Qinggu also breathed a sigh of relief. He sighed and said, "Wouldn't it be a waste if such a good daughter lost her life? It's good now. Finally, God helps the worthy. Old master is right. It's finally okay. Otherwise, Wang Yi would have been skinned alive." Xia Yu laughed heartily. Su Weiji was more attentive than Xia Yu. He didn't say anything and quietly observed Madame Ma, Yao Qinggu, and the Yao clan. Finally, his gaze fell on the worried Yao clan. "Old madam, are you worried about something?" Su Weiji cupped his hands and asked with a smile. Yao clan was stunned when she heard this. She didn't expect Su Weiji to ask her alone. She thought about how old Su Weiji and Xia Yu were. They were all old people by Pang Zhao's side. She didn't hide it and sighed, "To be honest, I was thinking that Prince Consort Ji couldn't win against such a barbaric race like the Taytan even though he had dealt with them for so many years. Moreover, the soldiers he brought back were all talking about how valiant the Taytan people are. The Qin clan's beauty was captured by the Taytan's prince consort and suffered a lot." Her words were very vague. Yao clan's mother-in-law's words could be understood as her heartache for Qin Yining's sufferings. However, based on Su Weiji's understanding of the Yao clan and his observation of their expressions, he realized that the Yao clan seemed to be worried about what their beautiful daughter-in-law had experienced after being captured by the valiant Taytan people. What if she couldn't keep her chastity? Su Weiji was speechless. He thought about Qin Yining's intelligence and decisiveness and his understanding and help to Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao couldn't bring Qin Yining back to the capital and didn't even dare to see Qin Huayuan. However, Qin Huayuan had always been considerate and didn't pester Pang Xiao. Family Qin's father and daughter were too open-minded and forgiving, which made Su Weiji admire them very much. Therefore, he couldn't stand the pettiness of the Yao clan and couldn't help but say, "Old madam is right." To put it bluntly, with Minister Qin's family background, Family Qin's daughter could have lived a stable and peaceful life. However, I didn't expect that she would suffer so much after being with Wang Yi. Although she's still alive, her situation isn't optimistic. Su Weiji's words were also very vague. On the surface, he seemed to agree with the Yao clan's words and said that Qin Yining's sufferings were pitiful. However, in reality, he was saying, if Qin Yining's daughter didn't marry your son, he wouldn't have to suffer so much. As a mother-in-law, you're actually worried about such trivial things. You really don't care about your own daughter and are worried about her chastity. Although the Yao clan and Su Weiji didn't understand what they were saying. However, which one of them was stupid? Yao Qinggu was the first one to understand. He frowned and glanced at his daughter, then took out his tobacco pipe and poured some tobacco into it. Madame Ma thought about it and immediately widened her eyes. However, she couldn't reprimand her daughter in front of Pang Zhao's advisors. She endured it until her fingers were trembling and she had to force a smile. Xia Yu and Su Weiji were naturally good at reading people's expressions. Seeing that the atmosphere had been ruined, they knew to take their leave. They looked at each other in the courtyard and couldn't help but sigh and walk out quickly. Madame Ma, who was in the room, had walked far away. She immediately slapped her hand heavily on the Kong bed. "You damned girl, what are you thinking in your head? Don't you have a conscience?" "Mother. What are you talking about?" The Yao clan stood up and looked at Madame Ma helplessly. Madame Ma said, "Do you think I didn't understand? Even if I'm a fool and can't understand, Mr. Su and Mr. Xia are so smart. How can they not understand what you mean? You're really... What should I say about you? Isn't your biological daughter. Aren't you worried about her life or death?" "Who said I'm not worried about the Qin clan's life or death? I've been so anxious these days that I can't eat or sleep, especially when Dai Fu is in such a state. How can I not be worried?" Chapter 499. Am I right to be worried? She and Dai Fu just got married. They didn't even kiss for a few days before she was kidnapped to the Titan. What kind of people are those in the Titan? I don't believe that the Qin clan can remain innocent in the Titan. What's wrong with me worrying that my son has been taken advantage of? You're still being stubborn. You heartless girl. Madame Ma was furious. She picked up the shoe sole in the sewing dustpan and hit the Yao clan. The Yao clan was hurt and hurriedly hid. Madame Ma had practiced martial arts before. How could she let the Yao clan escape? She grabbed them and pressed them on the Kong bed. She hit them more than 10 times on their buttocks. The Yao clan was in so much pain that tears fell from their eyes. Mother, stop hitting them. Stop hitting them. Madame Ma threw away the shoe sole angrily. She was filled with sorrow. I shouldn't have agreed to let you go and learn. You went to a rich family and learned a lot. You didn't even have the most basic conscience. I told you to learn well for 2 years and go out when you were old enough to know your place so that I could help you find a husband. In the end, you climbed into someone else's bed and came back pregnant. Yes, as parents, we didn't know what to do. Besides, Dai Fu is indeed a good child. We admitted that we didn't teach you well. But now you think about it. Do you still look like a pure person? What did you learn in the Pang family? You don't care about your daughter-in-law's life. You only worry about whether your daughter-in-law is innocent or not. You don't even have the most basic kindness. To put it bluntly, you are selfish. You only worry about yourself. Tell me, what's the difference between you and the Madame Pang you speak of? I have been honest and upright all my life. How did I raise such a wicked girl like you? The Yao clan got up at this time. Their hair was disheveled and their hairpins had fallen off. The makeup on their faces was ruined by their tears. Hearing Madame Ma bring up the past and every word she said was heart-wrenching, she couldn't help but shed tears of sorrow. Yao Qinggu was smoking on the side. When he heard the mother and daughter quarreling and crying, he couldn't help but sigh and say, Yuping, you were wrong in this matter. You can't let others know your thoughts. If Mr. Su and Mr. Xia hear your thoughts, Dai Fu, as a mother, do you still want to be close to your son? These words successfully poked at the most terrifying part of Yao Shi's heart. She was worried. As his mother, she saw how Pang Shao lived his life, she felt sorry for him. Otherwise, she would not too. Yao Qinggu knocked his pipe on the edge of the Kong and said, Your worries are not without reason. In the future, if you are worried that your child's bloodline is not pure, you can find a way to get Dai Fu 2 girls from scholarly families to be concubines. Why do you have to make such a fuss? When Madame Ma heard Yao Qinggu's words, she was so angry that she flipped over the Kong. She pointed at Yao Qinggu and scolded, So it's your Yao clan that's rotten and smelly from the very beginning. Only your grandson is human. Other people's children aren't raised by their parents. Yao Qinggu blinked at Madame Ma's scolding. He said helplessly, Don't get angry. I didn't say anything. It's not like I forced the Dai Fu to divorce the Qin clan. It's up to the Dai Fu to decide whether or not he wants to take concubines. There are so many people in the Fu, but I don't see the Dai Fu being tempted. Is that so? Madame Ma put her hands on her hips and said angrily, Yao, let me ask you. If you have a daughter who was brought to the disaster area by the plague to suffer just a few days after she got married, and you even took out your dowry to support your son-in-law. In the end, she didn't come back safely and was even lost by your son-in-law. How would you feel? Yao Qinggu was speechless for a moment. In fact, in this aspect, the family Qin had really done a good job. At least during this period of time, the family Qin had never made things difficult for Pang Shao. Madame Ma said again, this is not the worst thing. If your daughter was lost by your son-in-law, not only would your son-in-law's family not feel guilty, but they would also be worried if your daughter had slept with someone else, if she was unclean, and if she was fit to give birth to their child. If you were Yi's biological father, what would you think? Don't fucking speak such bullshit in such a dignified manner. Your Yao family has 2 rules. To put it bluntly, you're just being selfish. Madame Ma put one hand on her waist and pointed at Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan with the other. I've been in the underworld all my life and I can't stand those who don't have morals. You two are my husband and my daughter. Otherwise, I would have slapped you to death. Don't let me hear you say such things in the future. Otherwise, get out of here and don't acknowledge me as your daughter-in-law. Yu Ping, you don't have to acknowledge me as your mother either. Mother. Don't be like this. Father and I don't have any intention of abandoning the Qin clan. Besides, we're just thinking about it. We haven't done anything, have we? It's normal for us to be selfish and think about these things. There's nothing incomprehensible about it, right? Don't you feel sorry for your grandson? The Yao clan's members were full of helplessness and grievance. Madame Ma sneered, I feel sorry for Dai Fu. However, I also know that Dai Fu is a true man. In this world, there are things that should be done and things that shouldn't be done. I'm not as smart as you two, and I'm not as scheming as you two. However, I know that people can't do bad things. They have to live up to their conscience. Otherwise, they'll face retribution sooner or later. If you're not convinced, then I have nothing to say. I also know that you've always thought that I'm a vulgar mother. If you don't change your bad habits and still want to meddle in Dai Fu's affairs, then don't blame me for beating you to death. The Yao clan members were scolded until tears of grievance flowed down their faces. They began to sob. Yao Qinggu put down his tobacco pipe and straightened the Kong. He said, all right. Calm down. We're all doing this for Dai Fu, right? Besides, I'm just saying this. There's no need to beat around the bush. After all, as long as the Qin clan can return, she'll still be the princess consort. Even if she has 100 concubines, they won't be able to surpass her. Madame Ma was so angry that her face turned pale. She glared at Yao Qinggu and didn't know what to say. Yao Qinggu patted Madame Ma's shoulder comfortingly. Isn't it normal for a man to take in concubines? Don't you want to hold a few more great-grandchildren? I want to, but it depends on when he takes in a concubine. If Dai Fu takes a fancy to another girl as a concubine, or if Sister Yi takes the initiative to arrange a concubine for him, then that's normal. I don't care about the difference between the legitimate wife and concubine. After all, as long as I have one, they'll be my great-grandchildren. However, if you despise Sister Yi because she was kidnapped, then you're going against your word. The Yao clan members and Yao Qinggu looked at each other. The father and daughter pair tacitly stopped arguing with Madame Ma. In any case, Madame Ma was a stubborn person. Some things couldn't be explained clearly. Besides, it was still too early to say these things. The two stopped talking and listened to Madame Ma's nagging for a long time. At this time, Peng Xiao had already rushed to the family Qin and was waiting in the front hall. Percent Wang Yi, please wait a moment. My lord is taking care of the old madam. This lowly one will order someone to go in and pass on the message to ask master to come out. The steward who led the way bowed respectfully. Peng Xiao asked with some worry, is the old madam of your family unwell? Has an imperial physician been invited to take a look? Thank you for your concern, Wang Yi. The old madam has caught a cold. The physician has already been invited to take a look. Peng Xiao's brows furrowed even more tightly. He waved his hand to indicate for the steward to withdraw and invite the physician. The elderly's body was weak. They couldn't recover from a cold without harming the foundation like the young people. At the old madam's age, it could be said that she was a ripe melon waiting for the heavens to come and pick it. Qin Huayuan was a filial son. It was natural for him to be busy taking care of the sick. Thinking about Qin Yining's disappearance and the old madam's illness, Pang Xiao couldn't help but feel even more guilty. Qin Huayuan had suffered multiple blows. Pang Xiao lowered his head to read the contents of the note. Mu Jinghu was probably afraid that the note would fall into the hands of others, so he wrote it vaguely. However, the general meaning was clear. Qin Yining and Lu Heng had been captured by Si Qin together. They were both alive. There was no more detailed information. However, this simple sentence made the worried Pang Xiao think of many possibilities. Mu Jinghu was in Taitan. This meant that the Tianjizi was also in Taitan. The Tianjizi was cunning and shrewd by nature. It was unknown if he would scheme against Qin Yining and Lu Heng. Mu Jinghu didn't say under what circumstances he had met Qin Yining. However, Mu Jinghu had always protected the Tianjizi. Coupled with Pang Xiao's understanding of the Tianjizi, it was very likely that the Tianjizi had curried favor with Si Qin and stayed in the Taitan Palace. Qin Yining and Lu Heng were both locked up in the palace. Anari and Si Qin wanted to use them to negotiate and threaten De Zhou. However, Pang Xiao knew that Li Qitian was more wary of him now. If the Taitan used the two of them as a threat, Li Qitian would definitely not agree. No matter what the conditions were, Li Qitian cared about his reputation. How could he allow himself to be threatened by barbarians? But he didn't care about others. Qin Yining was his life. During this period of time, Qin Yining had been missing. It was as if he had lost his soul. He had resisted more than 30 imperial edicts in a row, a crime that could have been executed long ago. However, Li Qitian saw that he had lost his soul. He was afraid that outsiders would say that he treated a meritorious official harshly, so he didn't target him too much. Pang Xiao wished that he could grow a pair of wings and fly directly to the Taitan to bring Qin Yining back. Wang Yi. Just as Pang Xiao was deep in thought, a gentle female voice came from the door. Pang Xiao looked in the direction of the voice. He saw 8th Miss Qin Baoning, who was wearing a light pink jacket and a matching 8-piece dress. She walked forward with a black tray and smiled as she served tea. Wang Yi, please have some tea. Pang Xiao didn't have much of an impression of this cousin of Qin Yining. He didn't hate her either, so he just nodded slightly to greet her. He didn't take the tea, nor did he speak. It was obvious that he was waiting for 8th Miss Qin to put down the teacup and leave. 8th Miss Qin gently put down the teacup and hugged the black tray. She lowered her head nervously and shyly looked up at Pang Xiao. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.